Greetings, cozy knights. Lower your swords and rest by the fire. Tonight, we journey through the madness and mysteries of Oblivion's deepest lore. Drop a comment below and tell me where you're listening from tonight, and what games you want me to cover next, and subscribe if this helps you sleep. Sheogorath's Jiggalag transformation. The mad god Sheogorath, patron of creativity and insanity, harbors the realm's cruelest secret. He wasn't always the mad god. Long before the events of Oblivion, Sheogorath was Jiggalag, the Daedric Prince of Order, whose realm embodied perfect mathematical precision and absolute predictability. Jiggalag grew so powerful through his complete understanding of order that the other Daedric princes feared him, recognizing that his calculating nature threatened their very existence. In an unprecedented alliance, these rival gods cursed Jiggalag to become his own opposite, transforming the Prince of Order into the Prince of Madness. This curse operates on a cyclical basis, trapping Sheogorath in an endless pattern where, at the end of every era, he transforms back into Jiggalag just long enough to watch his beloved Shivering Isles torn apart by his own ordered hand during the Grey March, before being forced back into madness. The cruelty extends beyond mere transformation. Sheogorath retains full awareness of who he was, making his madness a prison rather than liberation. Every cheese wheel he summons, every nonsensical proclamation exists while he remembers being the universe's greatest logician. The Shivering Isles expansion reveals this curse can be broken, but only through the ultimate sacrifice of creating a new Sheogorath, while allowing Jiggalag to finally reclaim his original form, suggesting the curse required a Sheogorath to exist regardless of who fills the role. The Grey March cycle mechanics. The Grey March isn't random destruction, but follows precise metaphysical laws that reveal the curse's sophistication. At the end of each era, Jiggalag's ordered nature reasserts itself, beginning the systematic deconstruction of the Shivering Isles from the fringe inward, working with mathematical precision toward the center where Sheogorath's palace stands. The Knights of Order that manifest during this event aren't invaders from outside, but crystallizations of Jiggalag's principles made manifest, perfect soldiers following perfect tactics with no creativity or variation. These knights specifically target chaos, destroying anything unpredictable or creative first, from the mad citizens to the realm's impossible architecture. The Grey March progresses in stages, each representing deeper conversion from madness to order, turning the Isle's vibrant insanity into geometric crystalline structures. Sheogorath cannot fight this transformation because fighting himself creates paradox. Order opposing order only generates more order, making resistance futile. The realm's citizens have developed fatalistic acceptance, understanding they'll be destroyed and recreated countless times across eternity, their memories potentially persisting across cycles like recurring nightmares. This cyclical destruction reveals the curse's true horror. It doesn't just punish Jiggalag, but everything he creates as Sheogorath, ensuring even his madness-born creations suffer for his past power. The Grey March's inevitability mirrors the heat-death theory, suggesting all chaos eventually surrenders to entropy's order. Sheogorath's staff origins. The staff of Sheogorath represents more than a scepter of office. It embodies the fundamental duality of its wielder's nature. Crafted during the original transformation from Jiggalag to Sheogorath, this artifact literally holds pieces of both princes within its structure, containing crystallized order from Jiggalag's realm, fused with materials from the Shivering Isles' chaotic regions. The staff's power to freeze enemies or drive them mad reflects this dual nature, order, paralyzing while chaos liberates into insanity. Each gemstone embedded in its length corresponds to a different aspect of madness, from creative genius to destructive mania, allowing the wielder to channel specific types of insanity. The staff requires constant maintenance because order and chaos war within its construction, trying to either crystallize into geometric perfection or dissolve into formless energy. Previous Sheogoraths used different versions, each modified to match that iteration's particular flavor of madness, meaning the staff evolves with its wielder. The current staff's twisted design mirrors the mad god's crooked mind, its spiral pattern representing thoughts that never reach logical conclusion. When the hero of Kvatch claims this staff, they don't just receive power, but accept madness's burden, the weapon slowly influencing its bearer toward Sheogorath's thinking patterns. The staff's true function involves maintaining the barrier between Shivering Isles and Oblivion proper, its chaotic energies preventing Jiggalag's order from bleeding into surrounding realms. The Fork of Horripilation. Among Sheogorath's many artifacts, the Fork of Horripilation stands out for its absurd specificity and hidden depth. This seemingly useless dining implement was created to torment a specific individual across multiple lifetimes, proving the mad god's capacity for personalized cruelty. The fork's original victim was a pompous Breton noble who claimed to understand etiquette perfectly, so Sheogorath cursed him to experience horripilation, the standing of body hairs on end, whenever he attempted to eat with improper utensils, making every meal a battle between pride and physical discomfort. The fork itself carries this curse, transferring the effect to anyone who possesses it, spreading misery across generations. But the artifact's true purpose runs deeper than simple torment. It serves as a philosophical statement about the arbitrary nature of social rules and conventions. Why should one piece of shaped metal be more proper than another? The fork questions civilization's obsession with meaningless distinctions, revealing how much suffering humans create through artificial standards. Its placement in Oblivion's Border Watch settlement connects to Sheogorath's larger scheme, involving a fake apocalypse, showing how the mad god layers multiple levels of chaos into single locations. The fork's name itself mocks scholarly terminology, using medical language for something as mundane as goosebumps, highlighting academia's tendency to complexify simple phenomena. Completing the related quest reveals the fork is actually one of many forks of, each targeting different bodily responses, suggesting Sheogorath maintains an entire flatware collection devoted to making meals uncomfortable. The mad god's pocket realm, physics. The Shivering Isles operates on fundamentally different physical laws than Mundus or even other Oblivion realms, reflecting its creator's rejection of consistency. Gravity functions based on expectation rather than mass. Objects fall because observers expect them to, meaning truly mad individuals can sometimes walk on air by not believing in falling. Time flows erratically, moving faster in mania's manic episodes and slower in dementia's depressive stretches, making scheduling impossible and driving visitors toward madness through temporal disorientation. The realm's geography actively resists mapping. Paths that existed yesterday disappear today while new routes spontaneously generate, ensuring even long-time residents remain perpetually lost. Colors behave incorrectly. Blue might smell like cinnamon while red makes sounds like distant crying, suggesting synesthesia as the realm's default state. Plant life grows according to emotion rather than biology. Gardens blooming during joy and withering during sadness, making agriculture dependent on cultivating appropriate feelings. The division between mania and dementia isn't geographic, but psychological. The same location appearing vibrant or decayed based on the observer's mental state, meaning two people standing in identical spots might inhabit completely different environments. Physics equations don't work consistently. The same action producing different results each time, because causality itself suffers from mood swings. This reality-breaking nature serves Sheogorath's purpose perfectly. Extended exposure to impossible physics gradually erodes visitors' grip on objective reality, converting them into permanent residents who can't imagine normal worlds anymore. Saints versus Seducer's division meaning: the Shivering Isles split into mania and dementia, guarded by the Golden Saints and Dark Seducers respectively, represents more than simple dualism, but explores madness's full spectrum. The Golden Saints embody manic madness, excessive energy, grandiose delusions, violent creativity, and dangerous optimism that destroys through excess, enthusiasm. These warriors believe themselves invincible, charging into battle with religious fervor because their mania prevents acknowledging mortality or consequence. Their golden appearance reflects the manic's false brilliance, appearing divine while actually representing unstable mental states. The Dark Seducers manifest depressive madness, paranoid withdrawal, cruel certainty of failure, creative paralysis, and destructive pessimism. These soldiers fight with calculated cruelty, assuming death awaits everyone, so combat merely determines timing. Their shadowy aesthetic mirrors depression's darkness, beauty twisted into threatening forms. But the division contains deeper meaning. Sheogorath demonstrates that madness isn't singular, but contains infinite variations. No two insanities identical. The Saints and Seducers hate each other despite serving the same master, showing how different madnesses cannot coexist peacefully. Each type of insanity convinced its suffering represents the only true reality. Their eternal conflict mirrors the bipolar individual's internal war, manic and depressive episodes battling for dominance with the sufferer caught between. Sheogorath deliberately maintains this division to prevent either madness from achieving total victory, recognizing that pure mania or pure depression would destroy the realm, only their balance allowing sustainable chaos. The player must gain approval from both factions, suggesting effective madness requires integrating contradictory impulses rather than choosing one extreme. Sheogorath's mortal origins theory. Obscure texts and subtle dialogue hints suggest Sheogorath might have originated as a mortal who achieved apotheosis through madness, rather than existing as an eternal Daedric prince. The Mad God's fixation on mortal concerns, his cheese obsession, his interest in pranks rather than grand cosmic schemes, all suggest someone who remembers mortality and clings to its trivial pleasures. Some scholars argue that Jiggalag was never a Daedric prince, but rather the first mortal to achieve Chim, the universe-breaking enlightenment, and that his perfect understanding of reality's nature drove other cosmic entities to curse him with madness to prevent him from unmaking existence. This theory explains why Sheogorath behaves so differently from other Daedric princes. He retains mortal psychology beneath divine power, making him simultaneously more relatable and more terrifying. The ease with which the hero of Kvatch mantles Sheogorath supports this theory. If the role requires mortal perspective, then mortals transition into it more naturally than beings born to divinity. Ancient texts describe a Breton wizard named Arden Soul, who achieved impossible magical feats before disappearing from history, with some believing he became Sheogorath through experimental madness-inducing rituals. The Mad God's court contains many references to mortal culture, suggesting someone who studied humanity closely rather than viewing it from distant godhood. This origin would explain his simultaneous contempt and affection for mortals. He scorns what he used to be, while nostalgically recreating mortal experiences through divine means. Whether true or elaborate delusions spread by Sheogorath himself, the theory highlights how thin the barrier between mortal and divine really is. Madness potentially serving as the easiest path to godhood, because it destroys the self-limitations preventing ascension. The Wabbajack's creation myth. Sheogorath's most infamous artifact, the Wabbajack, embodies randomness made weapon, transforming targets into unpredictable forms with each activation. The staff's creation story varies depending on who tells it, with Sheogorath himself providing different accounts each time, but common elements suggest disturbing origins. One version claims the Wabbajack was forged from the crystallized laughter of a murdered child, mixing innocence and horror into power that makes reality itself giggle. Another tale describes it as Sheogorath's attempt to create a spell that would undo Jiggalag's curse, but the magic went wrong, creating randomness so pure it achieved nothing but chaos. The staff's name supposedly derives from the first sound it made when activated, Wabba Jabba Jack. Though this explanation seems suspiciously convenient, what remains consistent across stories is that the Wabbajack contains no predetermined transformation list. It samples from infinite possibility, meaning you could theoretically transform someone into anything that has ever existed or could exist, from sweet rolls to lesser Daedra, to abstract concepts given flesh. The weapon's true horror lies in its uncertainty. Victims don't die, but become fundamentally different beings, their consciousness potentially trapped in transformed bodies, experiencing existence as creatures they were never meant to be. Using the Wabbajack repeatedly on the same target produces different results each time, proving the transformations aren't based on the target's nature, but purely random cosmic selection. Some mages theorize the staff doesn't transform victims, but reveals what they already were in alternate timelines, pulling parallel universe versions into current reality. The Wabbajack's tendency to produce food items, particularly sweet rolls and cheese, suggests Sheogorath's subconscious influences the randomness, his obsessions bleeding through even supposedly pure chaos. Mehrunes' razor construction secret. Mehrunes Dagon's legendary dagger, capable of instantly slaying any target regardless of power or protection, contains a construction secret that reveals the Daedric Prince of Destruction's true nature. The razor wasn't forged, but rather grew from a seed of pure destruction planted in Oblivion's darkest forge, cultivated by sacrificing thousands of souls to nourish its development like a plant watered with blood. Each soul consumed during construction added microscopic serrations to the blade's edge, creating molecular-level teeth that sever the connection between body and soul, rather than simply cutting flesh. The dagger's pommel contains a captured fragment of Mehrunes Dagon's realm, the Deadlands, meaning wielders carry a piece of that hellscape wherever they travel, slowly corrupting surrounding reality toward destruction. Ancient texts describe how the smith who completed the razor's construction was immediately destroyed by his creation, the dagger's first victim being its maker, establishing a pattern where it eventually turns on everyone who possesses it. The blade's red coloring isn't decoration, but literal blood that cannot be cleaned. The weapon perpetually coated in its victim's life essence across all timelines simultaneously. Its tiny size compared to other legendary weapons reflects Dagon's philosophy that destruction doesn't require massive force. The smallest blade properly applied causes more devastation than the largest sword. The razor's instant kill ability isn't guaranteed but probabilistic, having a small chance to activate per strike, representing how destruction remains uncertain, disaster striking randomly rather than predictably. Owning the razor marks wielders for Dagon's attention, the Prince of Destruction watching through the blade's pommel gem, planning how to eventually reclaim or destroy the current owner. The pieces required to reforge the razor in Oblivion are scattered deliberately, Dagon ensuring only the most dedicated and ruthless individuals can reconstruct his favoured weapon. Azura's role in Dunmer transformation. Azura, the Daedric Prince of Dawn and Dusk, played a pivotal role in transforming the golden-skinned Chimer into the ash-skinned Dunmer. But her motivations reveal complex divine psychology. When the Tribunal achieved godhood through Kagranak's tools and the heart of Lorcan, they betrayed Azura's teachings and their promises to Nerevar, prompting her curse that changed an entire race's appearance. The transformation wasn't merely aesthetic, but carried metaphysical significance, turning the Chimer's golden skin to ash grey and their eyes red as warning beacons, marking them as a people who chose mortal gods over Daedric patrons. Azura's curse specifically targeted pride. The Chimer's beauty had made them vain, so she replaced it with an appearance others would fear and hate, forcing humility through prejudice. But the curse contained merciful aspects. The Dunmer's new appearance made them more resilient to Morrowind's harsh environment, their ash-grey skin blending with volcanic landscapes, and their red eyes seeing better in dim underground ruins. Some scholars argue Azura's curse was actually protection disguised as punishment. Making the Dunmer visually distinct prevented them from integrating into other cultures, preserving their identity across millennia. The transformation's permanence across generations shows Azura's power, operating on genetic levels, rewriting biology itself, rather than just affecting individuals. The Nerevarine prophecy represents Azura's long-game revenge, spending centuries preparing the perfect champion to destroy the Tribunal and restore proper worship. Her devotion to this grudge reveals Daedric Princess's alien psychology. What mortals see as excessive cruelty is simply inhuman patience, gods measuring time in eras rather than years. The Dunmer's eventual acceptance of their new appearance, even taking pride in it, shows Azura's curse failing in its psychological goals, the Dunmer's stubborn nature turning punishment into identity. Sanguine's drinking contest. Implications. Sanguine, the Daedric Prince of Debauchery, hosts a drinking contest in Oblivion that seems like harmless fun, but carries disturbing implications about consent and divine manipulation. The contest involves consuming progressively stronger drinks until the player blacks out, waking with no memory of their actions during the binge. This memory loss isn't simple intoxication, but magical erasure. Sanguine stealing the experiences for his own entertainment, collecting mortals' drunken adventures like others collect stamps. The drinks consumed aren't normal alcohol, but Daedric substances that affect the soul rather than just the body, creating addiction that transcends physical dependency into metaphysical craving. During the blackout period, the player character performs tasks throughout Cyrodiil, somehow traveling vast distances and completing complex actions while supposedly unconscious, suggesting Sanguine possessed their body to experience mortal drunkenness vicariously. The staff reward for winning represents Sanguine's sloppy seconds, power he's already tasted and discarded, offered to mortals as consolation prizes. The contest's location in a remote inn suggests Sanguine deliberately targets isolated individuals who won't be protected when they're vulnerable. Predatory behavior disguised as camaraderie. The various items stolen during the blackout and left in strange places indicate Sanguine forced the player to commit crimes, creating legal and social consequences for entertainment. Some victims of the player's blackout actions express fear or anger, revealing that drunken chaos leaves real damage, fun for Sanguine, but trauma for others. The complete memory wipe prevents the player from apologizing or making amends, ensuring victims never receive closure, showing how debauchery's celebration ignores the wreckage it creates. Sanguine's apparent friendliness masks his nature as a predator who views mortal agency as optional, consent meaningless when you can simply rewrite memory afterward. Hermaeus Mora's Forbidden Knowledge Price. Hermaeus Mora, the Daedric Prince of Forbidden Knowledge, offers power through his Ogma Infinium, but the tome's true price extends far beyond simple reading. The book contains knowledge that mortals aren't meant to possess, secrets about reality's structure that slowly corrode the reader's connection to normal existence. Each page absorbed adds information that cannot be forgotten, filling the mind with truths that contradict comfortable lies civilization depends upon, making the reader unable to engage in normal society. The Ogma Infinium's knowledge isn't neutral data, but mimetic hazard, ideas that replicate and mutate within the host mind, gradually rewriting personality and values toward Mora's alien perspective. Readers report dreams of endless libraries and archives after using the book, suggesting Mora can access their minds whenever he wishes, having installed backdoor access through his gift. The tome's 3 paths, representing different knowledge types, actually test which kind of obsession will consume the reader fastest. None of the choices are good, just different paths to the same destination. The permanent stat increases represent the reader's mind permanently altered. Optimization toward specific skills coming at cost of balanced personality development. Some scholars theorize the Ogma Infinium doesn't grant knowledge, but rather removes the mental barriers preventing access to information already present in the unconscious, meaning readers discover rather than learn, finding truths their psyche had hidden for protection. The book's apparent generosity, freely granting power without obvious immediate cost, represents long-term investment, Mora collecting the reader's soul after death, enriched with lifetime of experiences and knowledge. The tome can only be used once per person, not from magical limitation, but because a second reading would reveal truths that would shatter sanity completely. Mora showing restraint only because broken minds provide no interesting knowledge. Those who've used the Ogma Infinium report compulsive truth-seeking afterward, unable to accept comfortable ignorance, driven to uncover secrets at the cost of relationships, health, and happiness. The Skeleton Key's true function. The Skeleton Key, Nocturnal's artifact, appears to be merely a magical lockpick, but its true nature extends far beyond opening physical barriers. The key unlocks potential, removing limitations that keep mortals from accessing their full capabilities, whether those limitations are physical locks, mental blocks, or metaphysical restrictions. Using the key doesn't just open doors, but opens possibilities, each use subtly expanding the wielder's awareness of alternative paths and choices, showing doors in reality itself. The artifact's shape as a key is symbolic rather than necessary. It could theoretically take any form. Nocturnal choosing this appearance to make mortals underestimate its power as mere thief's tool. Ancient texts describe the skeleton key opening portals between Oblivion realms, suggesting it can unlock the barriers between different planes of existence, making it potentially the most dangerous artifact ever created. The key's ability to open any lock without breaking reflects its fundamental nature. It doesn't destroy barriers, but reveals they were never truly obstacles, showing wielders that most limitations exist only through belief. Nocturnal's willingness to let the key leave her realm periodically suggests she wants mortals to use it, spreading the understanding that nothing is truly locked, chaos serving her purposes. The Grey Fox's theft of the key represents ultimate irony, using a divine unlocking tool to steal itself, the perfect crime because it demonstrates the key's lesson, that even God's possessions can be taken. The key allegedly cannot be destroyed, because destroying it would lock existence itself, preventing all change and growth, making the universe static and dead. Some Daedric scholars worry that extended separation from Nocturnal weakens her, the key being essential to her nature as the Daedric Prince of Night and Luck, its absence slowly diminishing her power. The skeleton key's wisdom: true danger isn't what it opens, but what it reveals, showing wielders that every limitation is arbitrary and every rule is optional. Philosophical insight that undermines civilization's foundations. Namira's followers' cannibalism ritual. Namira, the Daedric prince of ancient darkness and revulsion, commands followers who practice ritualistic cannibalism, but their practices reveal disturbing theological implications about consumption and identity. The cult believes eating human flesh allows them to absorb their victims' experiences and memories, treating cannibalism as knowledge acquisition rather than mere sustenance. Their underground meetings feature elaborate feasts where members consume specific body parts based on what qualities they want to steal, eating hearts for courage, brains for intelligence, eyes for vision, both literal and metaphorical. The ritual's preparation involves weeks of fasting and sensory deprivation, breaking down the cultists' identity boundaries so they can more easily merge with consumed flesh. Namira herself appears at their gatherings as formless darkness, blessing meals with her presence, suggesting she feeds on the revulsion and horror mortals feel towards such practices. The cult members develop physical changes from their diet, their skin taking on corpse-like pallor, their eyes reflecting light like predators, their teeth subtly sharpening, becoming more like the darkness they worship. They justify their cannibalism through philosophy, claiming mortality makes all meat equal, human flesh no different from animal flesh, except for arbitrary social taboos they've transcended. The cult specifically targets the forgotten, consuming beggars, criminals, and outcasts, whose disappearances won't be investigated, making them complicit in society's tendency to treat certain lives as disposable. Members report experiencing their victims' final moments during consumption, feeling the terror and pain, treating this shared suffering as religious communion with death itself. Namira's ring, rewarding followers, grants increased personality while feeding on corpses, showing how the prince rewards breaking social boundaries, power coming from willingness to discuss civilized society. The cult's continued existence across centuries shows how societies fail to eliminate what they refuse to acknowledge. The cannibals persisting in shadows because authorities prefer pretending they don't exist over confronting their presence. Vermina's torpor connection. Vermina, Daedric Prince of Nightmares and Dreams, maintains mysterious connection to the condition called torpor, a state between sleep and death where victims remain conscious but paralyzed. The Skull of Corruption, her signature artifact, doesn't just create nightmares, but traps portions of victims' consciousnesses in eternal dreaming state, collecting these fragments in the staff like butterflies pinned in display cases. Those struck by the skull report experiencing the same nightmare repeatedly afterward, unable to escape even when awake, the dream bleeding into reality until they cannot distinguish waking from sleeping. Vermina's realm, Quagmire, contains the collected nightmares of everyone who ever slept, an infinite archive of fears and anxieties sorted by type and intensity, suggesting she studies mortal psychology through their worst moments. Her followers practice dream diving, entering others' nightmares to either learn secrets or inflict trauma, weaponizing the vulnerable sleeping state for espionage and assassination. The connection between Vermina and torpor suggests she can trap souls in perpetual near-death experiences, useful for punishing enemies or preserving allies in timeless stasis. Some scholars theorize all nightmares connect to Quagmire automatically, making every bad dream a brief visit to her realm, meaning Vermina touches every mortal regularly, whether they worship her or not. The prince's interest in dreams reveals them as windows into unconscious truth, nightmares expressing what waking minds refuse to acknowledge, making Vermina the keeper of civilization's collective shadow. Her artifact's name, Skull of Corruption, suggests nightmares corrupt reality by revealing uncomfortable truths, the staff not creating false fears, but manifesting real ones ignored during daylight. Victims of the skull often develop insomnia, desperately avoiding sleep to escape the planted nightmares, slowly going mad from exhaustion, showing how Vermina destroys through absence and presence equally. The dream plague she can inflict spreads nightmares contagiously, one infected dreamer contaminating others they sleep near, creating cascading psychological warfare. Periite's plague purpose. Periite, the Daedric prince of pestilence and tasks, appears as the weakest Daedric prince but serves crucial cosmic function, maintaining existence's natural order. His plagues aren't random cruelty, but population control and evolutionary pressure, culling the weak and forcing adaptation, making disease a form of cosmic pruning. The afflicted followers encountered in Periite's quest aren't victims, but volunteers, deliberately infected to serve their prince, viewing plague-bearing as sacred duty. Their trapped souls in oblivion while bodies wander, Tamriel creates disturbing split existence, consciousness experiencing one reality while flesh inhabits another. Periite's realm, the pits, contains orderly disease management, plagues sorted and catalogued with bureaucratic precision, showing pestilence as organized system rather than chaos. His dragon form appearance, lowest of the Daedric princes choosing mightiest mortal creature's shape, reveals complex relationship between power and presentation, suggesting appearances deceive. The Spellbreaker shield he rewards to followers reflects his role as disease manager. He creates plagues, but also provides defenses, maintaining balance rather than simply destruction. Periite's fixation on natural order means he opposes both excessive health and excessive sickness, wanting populations maintained at stable suffering levels, making him simultaneously healer and destroyer. His followers' green complexion and weak constitution reveal the cost of service, plague-bearing eventually consuming the host despite divine protection, showing even Daedric blessings carry prices. Some scholars argue Periite prevents worse disasters by releasing controlled plagues, his diseases inoculating populations against more devastating supernatural contagions from other Daedric princes. The prince's task focus suggests plagues serve specific purposes, rather than random affliction, each disease designed to accomplish particular goals, whether demographic adjustment, economic disruption, or social transformation. His relative weakness among princes might be strategic. Appearing non-threatening allows him to work without other Daedric powers interfering. Subtle, influence more effective than obvious power. Meridia's hatred of undeath origin. Meridia, the Daedric Prince of Life, Energy and Light, maintains fanatical opposition to undeath and necromancy. But her extreme stance reveals disturbing history. Unlike other Daedric princes who simply oppose rivals' domains, Meridia's hatred carries personal weight, suggesting past trauma related to undeath or life force corruption. Some texts claim she was originally a Magna GE, one of the original spirits who helped create Mundus before fleeing to Aetherius, and her expulsion from that realm into Daedric status came from experimenting with life force manipulation. This origin would explain her obsessive focus on life energy's purity, attempting to prove her worthiness to return to Aetherius by zealously protecting living energy from corruption. Her realm, the Coloured Rooms, contains infinite prisons where she eternally tortures undead creatures and necromancers, suggesting her opposition goes beyond philosophy into sadistic vengeance. Meridia's followers, the Umaril and later the Aurorans, function as light-based purifiers, burning away undeath with radiance, but their methods often destroy living beings caught nearby, showing her zealotry's collateral damage. The Dawnbreaker sword she offers as reward specifically harms undead and has chance to cause explosive purification, representing her philosophy that contamination requires purging rather than redemption. Her hatred extends beyond simple undead to anything that blurs life-death boundaries, making her oppose necromancy, soul trapping, and even some healing magic that she views as unnatural life extension. Some scholars worry Meridia's definition of undead expands over time, potentially including anyone who's been resurrected, healed from near death, or even just very old, making her increasingly dangerous to all mortality. Her appearance as beacon of light contrasts with the darkness of her methods, showing how absolute good can become absolute tyranny, righteousness turning monstrous when taken to extremes. The irony of a Daedric prince, technically outside life-death cycle herself, judging mortals for similar transcendence, reveals hypocrisy at her philosophy's core. Malakath's Ashpit realm nature. Malakath, the Daedric prince of spurned and ostracized, rules the Ashpit, a realm that embodies harsh survival and brutal honor. But its nature reveals complex truths about strength and weakness. The Ashpit appears as smoking wasteland filled with constant warfare, where spirits of worthy orcs fight eternally. But this isn't punishment but reward. Endless glorious combat without civilization's corruption. The realm's aesthetic mirrors Orsimer-cultural values, harsh conditions breeding strong warriors, beauty found in function rather than decoration, survival earning respect rather than being freely given. Malakath himself manifests as armored warrior covered in scars, each wound representing betrayals and dishonors he suffered, wearing his victimization as badge of honor. His origin story as Trinimac, elven hero god corrupted by Boethia into Malakath, explains his current form. He isn't Daedric prince who chose his domain, but victim transformed by trauma into god of victims. This transformation created the orcs as his people. Trinimac's elven followers twisted into their current form, sharing their god's curse. The Ashpit serves as refuge for strong rejected by weak civilization, place where might makes right and survival proves worth. philosophy appealing to those society cast aside. Malakath's code emphasizes honor through strength, but his definition of honor differs from civilized versions, focusing on keeping oaths and respecting hierarchy rather than mercy or restraint. The realm's constant warfare prepares spirits for potential return to Mundus, some orcs believing worthy warriors get reborn to continue fighting, making death just interruption rather than ending. Malakath's bitter nature stems from remembering being Trinimac, knowing what he lost, making him simultaneously protective of his orcs and resentful they exist only because he fell. His isolation from other Daedric princes mirrors orcs' isolation from other races, outcasts recognizing their own, but this separation prevents growth, neither god nor people developing beyond their foundational trauma. Manka Cameron's impossible Altmer heritage. Manka Cameron, leader of the Mythic Dawn cult, presents a genealogical impossibility that hints at reality manipulation or unreliable records. He claims Altmer heritage and appears Altmer, but his father was Bosmer and his mother Dunmer, making pure High Elf ancestry biologically impossible without supernatural intervention. This impossibility suggests several disturbing options. Either Manka altered his own race through Mysterium Xarxes magic, or he's lying about parentage, or he exists in state of quantum racial uncertainty, or reality itself was rewritten to make his impossible heritage retroactively true. His mastery of the Mysterium Xarxes granted him power to reshape reality at small scales, potentially including his own body and history, making himself into what he needed to be. The Xarxes is written in Daedric language, but speaks to readers in their native tongue, suggesting it manipulates perception and understanding, possibly extending to making readers perceive its bearer as whatever form suits their expectations. Mankar's children, Ruma and Raven, show mixed race characteristics despite their father's apparent Altmer purity, suggesting the racial transformation doesn't extend to offspring, only affecting Manka himself. His ability to wear the Amulet of Kings despite not being dragonborn represents another impossibility, the amulet rejecting anyone without divine right yet accepting him, implying he altered the amulet's recognition system, or convinced reality he qualified. The paradise he created through Mehrunes Dagon's power operates on different rules than standard Oblivion realms, containing mixed elements from Mundus and Oblivion, suggesting he has power to blur boundaries between different planes of existence. Some scholars theorize Mankar never existed as single person, but represents amalgamation of multiple cult leaders merged through dark ritual, explaining his contradictory heritage, this composite being appearing Altmer, because that race's features dominated the merge. His writings mix truth and lies seamlessly, making readers unable to distinguish which parts represent reality, potentially including his own description. Maybe everything known about Mankar Cameron is deliberate misinformation designed to obscure his true nature. Paradise Realm's psychological warfare. The paradise that Mankar Cameron creates for faithful Mythic Dawn cultists appears as reward, but functions as eternal torture disguised as paradise, revealing Mehrunes Dagon's cruel humor. The realm presents beautiful gardens and luxurious architecture, fulfilling every cultist's expectation of divine reward, but immortal Dremora hunt the residents for sport, killing them repeatedly. The cultists respawn after death, experiencing the trauma again and again, eternal life becoming eternal dying, but Cameron convinced them this constitutes paradise, testing their faith through suffering. The realm's beauty serves as psychological torment, making cultists question why paradise includes agony. creating cognitive dissonance that slowly breaks their minds. Some residents embrace the horror, viewing painful death as purification, repeatedly proving their devotion through enduring suffering, showing how ideology can reframe torture as blessing. Others hide in Paradise's corners, trying to avoid the hunters, but the realm offers no true safety, fear, and brief respites, creating hope that makes next capture more crushing. The Dremora hunters treat this as entertainment, showing Dagon's servants casual cruelty. They don't hate the cultists, but view them as toys, disposable playthings for immortal beings' amusement. Mankar walks Paradise untouched, protected by his status, forcing him to watch his followers suffer without intervening. Either uncaring or helpless, both options revealing his leadership's bankruptcy. The realm's structure traps souls permanently, preventing them from reaching Aetherius or Dreamsleave, effectively stealing afterlife prospects for Mehrunes Dagon's amusement. Some cultists try explaining away the horror, claiming suffering purifies, or that Paradise isn't meant to be comfortable. Rationalization showing how deeply indoctrination roots. Mind unable to accept that leaders lied. The player's invasion of Paradise attempting to stop Oblivion Crisis represents these cultists' only hope for escape. But many attack the player, defending the realm that tortures them, showing how thoroughly Cameron's ideology captured their identity. They cannot imagine existence outside the framework that defines their suffering. The Mysterium Xarxes binding process. The Mysterium Xarxes, Mehrunes Dagon's holy book, contains knowledge so dangerous that reading it unprepared drives mortals insane. But its binding process reveals even darker secrets. The tome was allegedly written by Dagon himself, composed from flayed skin of previous failed Daedric princes, beings who attempted to achieve divine status but fell short, their essence recycled into teaching material. Each page contains layer upon layer of text in different languages, some visible, others revealed only through specific reading techniques or states of consciousness, making complete comprehension impossible. The book actively resists casual reading, showing different content to different readers based on their capacity to understand, essentially customizing itself to match the reader's level, while always presenting material slightly beyond their grasp. Mankar Cameron spent years learning to read it fully, the process slowly transforming him from scholar to fanatic as accumulated knowledge eroded his connection to normal morality and reality. The Xarxes teaches that Mundus is actually Oblivion realm, that mortality is the true curse, and that Mehrunes Dagon represents freedom through destruction, philosophical framework that inverts all conventional wisdom. Its magical power extends beyond knowledge to ritual instructions, teaching how to create paradise realms, bind Daedra, and reshape reality, making it essentially a divine instruction manual. The book's survival across eras despite multiple attempts to destroy it suggests indestructibility or rapid reformation. Dagon ensuring his scripture persists regardless of opposition. Martin Septim's sacrifice of the Mysterium Xarxes to open portal provides enough power to summon Akatosh's avatar, suggesting the tome contains concentrated divine essence, its destruction releasing energy comparable to God's manifestation. The burn marks and stains throughout the book's pages indicate previous readers' attempts to destroy sections they found too dangerous, but the text always remains readable, contamination unable to eliminate information. Some scholars worry that copies of the Mysterium Xarxes exist, that Mankar's version wasn't unique, meaning Dagon's teachings continue spreading despite the original's destruction, making the mythic dawn philosophy potentially unkillable. Mythic Dawn sleeper agents. The Mythic Dawn cult didn't just operate openly through identified members, but placed sleeper agents throughout Cyrodiil's power structure, creating paranoia that extends beyond the Oblivion Crisis's end. These sleepers lived normal lives for years, sometimes decades, waiting for activation codes delivered through seemingly innocent conversations or events. Their programming so deep, they didn't consciously know their own allegiance. The cult used sophisticated indoctrination combining magical compulsion and psychological manipulation, breaking subjects' wills, then rebuilding them as tools serving Mehrunes Dagon, while maintaining surface functionality. Some sleepers held important positions in guilds, government and military, meaning their eventual activation could have devastated Cyrodiil's ability to respond to crisis. Traitors opening gates from within, while external invasion occurred. The 4 books of Manka's commentaries on the Mysterium Xerxes served as both recruitment and activation tools, each volume containing hidden triggers that would awaken dormant programming in prepared minds. After the crisis ended, paranoia about remaining sleepers created witch hunts, innocent people accused based on suspicion alone, showing how terrorism's real victory comes from destroyed trust rather than physical damage. Some sleepers never activated, living out entire lives never knowing they contained deadly programming, dying with their conditioning intact, time bombs that simply never went off. Others activated after crisis ended, completing meaningless missions for cult that no longer existed, showing programmed loyalty persisting beyond its purpose. The psychological damage to discovered sleepers who survived proved catastrophic. Learning they'd lived lies or contained hostile programming destroyed their sense of self, many choosing suicide over continuing in compromised existence. Scholars worry about delayed activation sleepers, agents programmed to wake years or decades after crisis, ensuring Dagon's influence persists long after apparent defeat. The sleeper program's sophistication suggests Manka received assistance from intelligence beyond mortal, possibly Dagon himself, teaching espionage techniques to his prophet, making the Mythic Dawn more than cult, but fully developed covert operation. Sigil Stone creation mechanics. The Sigil Stones powering Oblivion Gates contain concentrated Daedric essence, but their creation process reveals disturbing truths about Mehrunes Dagon's invasion mechanics. Each stone is grown rather than crafted, seeded in deadlands, and nurtured with harvested souls until they crystallize into focal points capable of bridging realities. The stones contain miniature copies of Dagon himself, fragment consciousnesses that think and plan, making them semi-sentient rather than simple tools. Their placement at gate tops serves dual purpose, both anchoring the portal and serving as command nodes, directing Daedric forces. Destroying them collapses gates because it eliminates the invasion's brain. The various sigil stones' different enchantments represent different aspects of Dagon's nature, each stone specialized for particular destruction types, creating taxonomy of annihilation. The stone's distinctive appearance, crystalline structures with internal fires, mirrors their function as solid chaos. Orders form containing disorder's essence. Removing stones from their gates serves as theft from Dagon's realm, permanently weakening his ability to create new portals, making adventurers who collect multiple stones into significant thorns in his invasion plans. The stones remain active after gate closure, continuing to channel Daedric energy into Mundus, creating miniature reality distortions around their owners, slowly corrupting surrounding space toward oblivion-like states. Enchanting items with sigil stones essentially brands them with Mehrunes Dagon's mark, potentially allowing him to track or influence enchanted objects, making their use a bargain with unclear costs. Some mages theorize the stones could be reprogrammed, turned from invasion tools into defensive wards, but attempting this risked awakening the fragment consciousness within, possibly turning Experimenter into Dagon's puppet. The limited number of sigil stone types, despite thousands of gates, suggests standardized production. Dagon operating invasion-like factory, mass-producing components rather than custom crafting each portal. The stone's tendency to crack and lose power over time shows they're consuming themselves as fuel, eventually burning out and becoming inert crystals, meaning Dagon expected quick victory rather than sustained conflict, his invasion designed for blitzkrieg rather than occupation. Dagon's previous Mundus invasions. Mehrunes Dagon's Oblivion Crisis represents not his first attempt to invade Mundus, but merely his most recent historical records, suggesting multiple previous incursions across different eras. Ancient texts describe the Battlespire attack, where Dagon invaded the Imperial training facility floating in Oblivion, showing his willingness to strike military targets directly. Further back, legends speak of the Lig destruction, an entire parallel version of Tamriel possibly consumed by Dagon's forces, the survivors fleeing to our version and becoming source of some culture's origin myths. These repeated invasion attempts suggest Dagon's nature compels him toward Mundus specifically. Something about mortal realm fascinates or offends him enough to justify endless assault. The varying invasion methods across attempts show learning and adaptation. Dagon adjusting tactics based on previous failures, evolving from direct assault to cult-facilitated infiltration. The Dragonfire's existence as Dagon's specific defense mechanism suggests the Septim Empire knew he posed greatest threat among Daedric princes, prioritizing protection against his particular form of invasion. Some scholars theorize Dagon doesn't want to conquer Mundus, but destroy it entirely, viewing mortal realm as cosmic mistake requiring correction through fire and ruin. His alliance with Mankar Cameron represents unprecedented approach. Previous invasions relied on brute force rather than sophisticated cult indoctrination. The crisis's ultimate failure, despite initial success, might dissuade future attempts, or simply delay them until Dagon develops new approach. The Amulet of Kings, destruction preventing future dragonfires, paradoxically makes Mundus more vulnerable. Akatosh's direct intervention replacing systematic defense, requiring God's personal attention rather than institutional protection. Dagon's patience across multiple failed invasions shows Daedric princes operate on timescales mortals can barely comprehend. Setbacks that would discourage mortals barely register as inconveniences to immortal being. The Dragonfire's true function. The Dragonfires maintained by Septim Dynasty served as mystical barrier preventing Daedric invasion, but their underlying mechanics reveal sophisticated magical engineering. The fires function as reality anchors, strengthening the barrier between Mundus and Oblivion by constantly asserting mortal realm separateness from Daedric planes. Their connection to Akatosh, dragon god of time, suggests temporal component to their protection, possibly creating time lag between Oblivion and Mundus that prevents synchronized invasion. The requirement for Dragonborn Emperor to light them ensures divine bloodline maintains the ward, making protection dependent on specific genetic lineage rather than simple ritual. This dependency creates vulnerability, eliminating Dragonborn line compromises entire defense system. explaining why Mythic Dawn assassination of all Septim heirs served as Invasion's crucial first step. The fires burning in Temple of the One doesn't just prevent gates from opening, but weakens existing ones, forcing Dagon to expend more energy maintaining portals while fires remained lit. Their extinguishment allowed gates to multiply rapidly, showing the fires didn't just block new incursions, but actively suppressed Daedric influence across all of Tamriel. The ancient origin of dragonfires, established thousands of years before current crisis, suggests this wasn't first time they proved necessary, implying cyclical pattern of Daedric attempts requiring periodic divine intervention. Martin's Septims sacrifice permanently activated the fires by essentially making himself their fuel. His transformation into Akatosh's avatar, creating permanent connection rather than requiring periodic relighting. This permanent activation might prevent all Daedric influence rather than just invasions, potentially cutting Tamriel off from both harmful and beneficial Daedric contact. The fire's reliance on Amulet of Kings as focus shows how artifacts can serve as linchpins for massive magical systems, single object's destruction compromising continent-spanning protection. Their religious significance to Imperials shows how magical systems become cultural institutions, the Dragonfire's protection creating Empire's legitimacy rather than military might. Martin's transformation. Permanence. Martin's Septim sacrifice to end the Oblivion crisis, transforming into Avatar of Akatosh to battle Mehrunes Dagon, raises questions about his current state and consciousness. The transformation appears permanent, his mortal body consumed to fuel divine manifestation. But whether his soul persists inside Akatosh's avatar or dispersed completely remains unknown. The statue that remains after defeating Dagon might be Martin's actual body transformed to stone, rather than mere memorial, his consciousness trapped in eternal frozen moment of triumph and agony. Some theologians argue Martin achieved apotheosis, becoming part of Akatosh permanently, rather than simply borrowing God's form, meaning the gentle scholar now exists as facet of the dragon god's personality. This interpretation suggests prayers directed at Martin might reach Akatosh, the god of time, potentially channeling that worship to the consciousness that once was Martin. Alternative theory claims Martin's soul was consumed as fuel, destroyed entirely to power the transformation, making his sacrifice truly final, rather than transformation into different existence. The transformation specifics. How exactly Amulet of King's destruction enabled avatar summoning remain mysterious, suggesting unique alignment of circumstances that cannot be replicated. Martin's last words to the player express acceptance and determination, showing he understood transformation's permanence and chose it anyway. Remarkable courage from someone who never wanted power or responsibility. The player's inability to retrieve his body or possessions, everything consumed in transformation, emphasizes totality of sacrifice, Martin leaving nothing behind except memory and legacy. Imperials venerate him as saint or demigod, but this worship might be misplaced if he no longer exists as distinct consciousness, prayers reaching empty stone or subsumed completely by Akatosh. The transformation prevented Mehrunes Dagon's full manifestation, showing Avatar's power exceeded Daedric princes in that moment, suggesting Akatosh's might vastly surpass his Daedra when directly manifested, rather than working through intermediaries. The hero of Kvatch's disappearance, the champion who saved Cyrodiil from Oblivion crisis and potentially became Sheogorath, mysteriously vanishes from history, their ultimate fate remaining one of Tamriel's greatest mysteries. Official records barely mention them, despite closing every Oblivion gate and defeating Dagon's champion, suggesting deliberate historical erasure or the hero's own desire for anonymity. If the champion mantled Sheogorath, they exist in perpetual madness, their mortal identity completely subsumed by Daedric Prince role, consciousness transformed beyond recognition. This transformation means the gentle hero who saved Cyrodiil now torments mortals for entertainment. Ultimate tragic irony that Protector became Tormentor through assuming godhood. The alternative, if they refuse Sheogorath's mantle, leaves their fate completely unknown, possibly wandering Tamriel anonymously or dying forgotten despite their service. Some theories suggest the hero went mad from accumulated horrors witnessed during crisis, retreating from civilization to live as hermit, unable to return to normal life after experiencing such cosmic-scale trauma. The multiple paths available during Oblivion's questlines mean different heroes took different actions, creating Quantum State, where the champion simultaneously leads different factions or achieves different endings across parallel timelines. This multiplicity might explain their erasure, history unable to reconcile contradictory accounts of what single individual accomplished, defaulting to vague acknowledgement rather than specific records. Their potential immortality as Sheogorath means they might still influence current events. Mad God, who remembers being mortal, occasionally helping Tamriel in bizarre ways that seem random but serve protective purposes. The lack of monuments or celebrations for their service shows how quickly societies forget saviors when crisis passes. Moving on to next problem without properly honoring previous generations' sacrifices. If they survived as mortal, they'd watch younger generations take credit for their work or misunderstand the crisis's nature, knowing truth but unable to correct record without sounding insane. Aftermath. Refugee crisis. The Oblivion crisis's ending didn't immediately restore stability, but created massive refugee crisis as populations fled destroyed regions and imperial authority collapsed. Entire cities burned during Daedric assaults, leaving tens of thousands homeless and traumatized, overwhelming Cyrodiil's capacity to provide aid. The destroyed settlements couldn't be quickly rebuilt due to resource shortages and ongoing fear of new gates opening, creating permanent displacement for many communities. Refugees flooding into remaining safe cities created overcrowding, disease, and resource competition. Secondary disasters following the primary invasion. Imperial government, already weakened by Septim Dynasty's end, lacked resources and authority to coordinate effective relief, leaving local leaders to manage overwhelming humanitarian crisis alone. Some regions used refugee influx as excuse for xenophobia and violence, blaming outsiders for local problems. Crisis creating divisions that persist for generations. The trauma extends beyond physical displacement, survivors witnessing Daedric horrors, developing mental health issues that Third-Era medicine couldn't treat. Entire generation damaged psychologically. Children orphaned by crisis, created population of traumatized youths, raised on stories of demons and destruction, shaping Fourth Era's darker worldview. Economic collapse followed invasion, trade routes disrupted, farms destroyed, and labor force killed or scattered, creating poverty that lasted decades. The Mages Guild's partial responsibility for crisis, their member Mankar Cameron, led to decreased trust in magical institutions, worsening public access to magical assistance during recovery. Religious crisis accompanied physical one, many questioning God's protection after such widespread suffering, either losing faith or desperately clutching closer to religious institutions. The lack of clear successor after Martin created power vacuum. Various claimants and opportunists attempting to seize throne, while realm needed unified leadership most. This political instability prevented coordinated recovery, resources diverted to factional conflicts rather than rebuilding. Hannibal Traven's self-sacrifice. Logic, the Archmage's final act, trapping his own soul in a colossal black soul gem to empower the player against Manimarco, raises profound questions about the ethics of necromancy and sacrifice. Traven spent his entire tenure as Archmage crusading against necromancy, enforcing the guild's ban so strictly that half the Council of Mages resigned in protest when he took office. Yet his final solution to defeating the King of Worms involved the very practice he'd condemned, creating a supreme black soul, gem containing his own essence, the ultimate form of the art he'd fought against. This hypocrisy suggests Traven recognized that absolute moral positions crumble when confronted with existential threats, that survival sometimes demands embracing the tools you've sworn to destroy. The ritual required precise timing and deliberate intent, meaning Traven spent his final moments performing necromantic magic while fully conscious, experiencing firsthand the violation of natural death he'd prevented others from committing. His sacrifice proved strategically questionable, since the player could potentially defeat Manimarco without the Soul Gem's power, making Traven's death possibly unnecessary. A grand gesture that achieved less than intended. The philosophical implications extend further when considering Traven essentially committed suicide through dark magic, actions that would have resulted in immediate expulsion had any other mage attempted them. His final words express no regret or explanation, just grim determination, suggesting he'd already wrestled with the moral contradictions and accepted them. Some guild members later questioned whether Traven's crusade against necromancy stemmed from genuine ethical concern or fear of its power. His willingness to use it when convenient revealing possible deeper motivations. The soul gem containing Traven's essence presumably dissipated after empowering the player, meaning his soul experienced true destruction rather than journey to an afterlife. Permanent oblivion in exchange for temporary advantage. Traven's legacy within the Mages Guild remains complicated, remembered both as principled reformer and as hypocrite who abandoned his values when personally inconvenient. The Council's decimation. The Mages Guild's Council of Mages suffered catastrophic losses during the Necromancer conflict, with multiple members killed or driven to treachery, nearly destroying the guild's leadership structure. When Traven assumed the Archmage position, half the existing council resigned rather than serve under his controversial reforms, creating immediate instability at the organization's highest levels. The position sat vacant for years while Traven struggled to find replacements willing to enforce his necromancy ban. Many qualified candidates refusing appointments they viewed as political rather than meritocratic. Those who did accept council positions became prime targets for the Order of the Black Worm. Manimarco, recognizing that destroying the Mages Guild's leadership would cripple organized magical resistance. Council members Erlav Jarl and Karanya both revealed themselves as necromancer infiltrators, suggesting the Order had been planting agents in guild leadership for years, possibly predating Traven's reforms. Jarl's death, while guarding the Bloodworm Helm, showed how thoroughly the necromancers had compromised guild security, placing their own people in positions specifically designed to protect against them. Karanya's betrayal proved even more devastating, since she nearly succeeded in delivering the necromancer's amulet directly to Manimarco, demonstrating how vulnerable the guild's inner circle had become. The Bruma Guild Hall massacre eliminated several potential council candidates, the necromancers specifically targeting locations with promising leadership prospects. By the questline's conclusion, only Raminus Polus survived from the original council, the player's promotion to Archmage leaving the organization's highest governing body reduced to 2 people. This vacuum created serious administrative problems, since proper guild governance required 5 council members minimum, according to charter, but qualified survivors were scarce. The player character's immediate elevation to Archmage, without traditional training or gradual advancement, reflected pure necessity rather than merit. The guild so desperate for leadership, they abandoned normal procedures. Future stability remained uncertain since the traumatized organization had lost institutional knowledge and experienced administrators, leaving reconstruction to a warrior scholar and a single surviving bureaucrat. Traven's ineffective leadership. Hannibal Traven's tenure as Archmage, while well-intentioned, demonstrated remarkable ineffectiveness that nearly destroyed the institution he led. His first major action upon assuming office involved implementing the necromancy ban, which immediately cost the guild half its council and numerous members who disagreed with prohibiting an entire school of magic. The ban's practical effect proved minimal, since necromancers simply operated independently, forming the Order of the Black Worm into a more organized and dangerous force than previously existed. Traven's second major reform restructured guild halls to each specialize in specific magical schools, creating inefficiency and inconvenience for members who now needed to travel between cities for comprehensive magical education. This reorganization served no clear practical purpose, appearing to be change for change's sake, making members work harder while providing no tangible benefits. His requirement for recommendation letters from every guild hall before allowing Arcane University access created bureaucratic barriers that accomplished nothing beyond annoying prospective members. When faced with credible intelligence about necromancer threats, Traven repeatedly dismissed warnings as exaggeration, his unwillingness to accept bad news allowing problems to metastasize. The spy Mucianus risked his life sending reports from behind enemy lines, but Traven and the council ignored them because they contradicted preferred narratives about the threat's magnitude. When forced to act, Traven's decisions proved counterproductive, like sending Varanus Daunton and other inexperienced members to clear trolls from Forsaken Mine, resulting in their massacre by Blackwood Company mercenaries. His response to the Bruma Hall attack came too late, arriving only after everyone except one survivor had been killed, demonstrating poor crisis response. Traven's trust in council members Jarl and Karanya showed poor judgment, since both proved to be necromancer agents, suggesting his personnel decisions were compromised. His final plan against Manimarco involved sacrificing himself to create a weapon, solving the problem through death rather than competent leadership. Some guild members privately believed Traven used the necromancer crisis to consolidate personal power, pointing to how convenient threats can be for authoritarian administrators. His legacy left the Mages Guild weaker, smaller, and more traumatized than when he'd assumed office. The recommendation system's purpose. Traven's requirement that apprentices secure recommendations from all 7 guild halls before accessing the Arcane University served multiple functions, not all of them pedagogical. On surface level, the system forced prospective mages to demonstrate commitment and competence across diverse magical disciplines ensuring only serious students reached advanced training. Each hall's recommendation quest tested different skills, from investigating mysterious deaths to recovering stolen items to solving magical puzzles, providing broad assessment of candidate capabilities. The system also distributed work across guild halls, rather than concentrating all recruitment at the university, preventing the central location from being overwhelmed with applicants and failures. From administrative perspective, recommendations created gatekeeping that reduced university enrollment, limiting access to dangerous advanced magic like enchanting and spellmaking to proven members. This exclusivity maintained university prestige and prevented proliferation of powerful magical knowledge to unqualified practitioners who might misuse it. The political dimension proved equally important, since the recommendation system forced prospective members to interact with local guild representatives across Cyrodiil, building connections and loyalty to regional halls rather than just the central institution. Traven's implementation of this requirement came shortly after his election, suggesting it served his consolidation of power by ensuring new members owed their advancement to his system, rather than previous traditions. Critics noted the policy created artificial scarcity of advanced magical education, limiting the number of skilled mages available when Cyrodiil desperately needed them during the Oblivion crisis. The quests themselves often involved menial tasks or solving problems local mages could have handled, suggesting the recommendations tested obedience as much as competence. Some hall leaders, like Falker in Cheydinhal, exploited the system, assigning deliberately dangerous tasks, hoping to eliminate candidates they personally disliked. The recommendation from Bruma became impossible to complete after the hall's destruction, though by that point the player had already gained access. Overall, the system represented Traven's philosophy of restrictive control over magical knowledge, prioritizing security over accessibility, even as threats mounted across the province. Black Soul Gem creation. The process for creating Black Soul Gems capable of trapping human souls represents one of necromancy's darkest techniques and a major plot point in the Mages Guild questline. Standard soul gems can only capture creature souls, their capacity limited by the gem's size and the target's spiritual power. But Black Soul Gems transcend this limitation through specific ritual timing. The transformation requires exposing grand or greater soul gems to the light of Necromancer's moon, the specific astronomical event when Arkay's divine protection weakens, allowing perversion of natural soul entrapment. This moon phase occurs at specific intervals, forcing necromancers to plan their gem creation around celestial schedules they've carefully calculated and recorded. The Arcane University's own observatory equipment could theoretically predict necromancers' moon appearances, meaning the Mages Guild possessed the knowledge necessary for Black Soul Gem creation, despite officially opposing it. Falkar's Black Soul Gems, discovered in his Cheydinhal quarters, revealed that necromancer infiltration extended deeper than suspected, with agents operating openly within guild halls. The gems' creation violated multiple divine mandates, particularly Arkay's laws governing death and soul transition, making their manufacture not just unethical, but theologically heretical. Once created, Black Soul Gems functioned identically to normal soul gems, except for their capacity to trap sentient souls. The Black designation referring to the spiritual corruption, rather than physical appearance. Using Black Soul Gems for enchanting provided significantly more powerful results, since human souls contained more energy than creature souls, creating strong economic incentive for their production, despite moral prohibitions. The Necromancer's amulet, Karanya attempted to steal, served as a grand black soul gem, capable of holding multiple human souls simultaneously, representing the pinnacle of this dark art. Manimarco's eventual defeat involved his soul being trapped in a black soul gem, the ironic punishment of being imprisoned by his own preferred tool. The technique's existence raised theological questions about soul mechanics, particularly whether Arke's protection was truly absolute or simply strong, requiring specific astronomical conditions to circumvent. Some scholars speculated that Necromancer's moon wasn't a weakening of divine protection, but rather a natural phenomenon Arke permitted, testing mortals' moral strength through temptation. Raminus Paulus's survival. The fact that Raminus Paulus emerged as the only surviving council member from Traven's original administration raises questions about his competence, luck, or possible foreknowledge of threats. Unlike other council members who led field operations or handled dangerous artifacts, Raminus remained primarily in the Arcane University, handling administrative duties, a position that kept him safely away from necromancer attacks. His role as recruiter and quest distributor meant he sent other people into danger while remaining behind secure walls, a cautious approach that proved justified when necromancers decimated guild ranks. Raminus demonstrated remarkable political survival instinct, supporting Traven's controversial reforms without becoming so associated with them that he'd face backlash when they proved disastrous. He maintained positive relationships across the guild despite the fractured council and member defections, suggesting diplomatic skills that served him well during crisis. When Traven died and the player became Archmage, Raminus smoothly transitioned to supporting the new leadership without missing a beat, showing adaptability that bordered on opportunism. Some members wondered whether Raminus knew more about the necromancer infiltration than he revealed, pointing to how convenient it was that threats eliminated his rivals, while leaving him positioned to become the new Archmage's right hand. His survival allowed institutional continuity that might otherwise have been lost, his knowledge of guild procedures and traditions proving invaluable during Reconstruction. Raminus never showed interest in the Archmage position himself, content to advise and administer rather than lead, a self-awareness that made him valuable precisely because he didn't seek power. His relationship with the player character developed from formal superior-subordinate into partnership, Raminus recognizing that the hero who saved the guild deserved respect regardless of their lack of traditional magical training. The post-questline dynamic created an unusual situation where the Archmage possessed combat prowess and fame, while Raminus held institutional knowledge and administrative competence, requiring cooperation rather than hierarchy. His long service to the guild, surviving 3 different Archmages and countless crises, made Raminus perhaps the most important person in the organization, despite never holding its highest office. Spellcrafting restrictions. The Mages Guild's monopoly on spellcrafting and enchanting services, restricting these powerful techniques to high-ranking members, reflected both safety concerns and political control. Creating custom spells allowed mages to combine magical effects in potentially dangerous ways, generating combinations that could devastate users and bystanders if improperly calibrated. Restricting access prevented inexperienced mages from accidentally creating catastrophic spell combinations, like linking area effect destruction with insufficient magicka to control it. The enchanting restrictions served similar purposes, since poorly made enchantments could malfunction in ways that cursed users or destroyed valuable soul gems without providing benefits. These limitations also maintained the guild's value proposition. ensuring members had strong incentive to advance in rank beyond simple access to trainers and merchants. The service's availability only at the Arcane University further concentrated power, requiring members to travel to the Imperial City rather than accessing advanced magic locally. This centralization allowed the Council to monitor who created what spells and enchantments, maintaining oversight on dangerous magical development. Some cynics noted that restricting these services created artificial scarcity, making the guild essential rather than merely convenient for serious practitioners. The spellmaking altars themselves represented rare and expensive magical infrastructure, their construction and maintenance requiring resources that justified restricting access. However, many independent mages learned these techniques outside guild structure, proving they weren't inherently guild exclusive, but rather artificially gate-kept. The Shivering Isles expansion revealed that Sheogorath's realm contained even more advanced spell crafting and enchanting facilities, suggesting the guild's technology wasn't unique, but rather carefully controlled. After becoming Archmage, the player gained unrestricted access to these services, along with a special chest in their quarters that could duplicate common alchemical ingredients, showing how power came with practical benefits. The Blackwood Company's Heist Tree. The revelation that the Blackwood Company derived its members' superhuman combat abilities from a corrupted history connects to deep Elder Scrolls lore about Argonian biology and Black Marsh. Heist trees serve as the semi-sentient and possibly immortal organisms that granted Argonians consciousness, their sap containing powerful chemicals that influence those who consume it. When Argonians drink his sap as part of cultural rituals, they experience visions, enhanced abilities, and deeper connection to their racial memory. The trees serving as both parents and gods to the reptilian race. The Blackwood Company's smuggled history came directly from Black Marsh's swamps, torn from its natural environment and replanted in their headquarters basement, a violation of both ecological and spiritual significance. This particular tree was sick or corrupted in ways never fully explained, its sap producing more extreme effects than healthy his trees would, turning even Argonians into mindless berserkers. The mechanical pumping system surrounding the tree represented crude industrial exploitation of biological magic, steam-powered extraction replacing natural communion with forced harvesting. When non-Argonians consumed this corrupted sap, their bodies lacked the specialized biology to process it safely, resulting in powerful hallucinations that caused them to perceive civilians as monsters. The Water's Edge massacre resulted from this corruption. Company members, under the sap's influence, genuinely believing they were killing goblins when actually slaughtering innocent townspeople. The addictive properties of the corrupted sap created dependency among company members, who needed regular doses to function and suffered terrible withdrawal without them, ensuring loyalty through chemical enslavement. Ajum Karjin, the company's second-in-command, chose suicide rather than reveal this secret, showing how thoroughly the sap had corrupted members' judgment and loyalty. Destroying the tree by damaging its extraction apparatus set it aflame, the burning heist releasing toxic smoke that likely killed anyone nearby who breathed it. Whether the tree possessed sentience and suffered during its imprisonment remains unknown, though heist trees in Black Marsh demonstrate intelligence suggesting this specimen experienced its own torment. The company's collapse after the tree's destruction showed how completely they'd become dependent on chemical enhancement rather than genuine skill. Some scholars speculated that the tree's corruption stemmed from its forced removal from Black Marsh, severing it from the mystical network connecting all his trees, driving it mad through isolation. His sap's varied effects. The differences in how his sap affected Blackwood Company members based on their race reveals complex biological interactions between the substance and different physiologies. Argonians consuming the sap experienced enhanced combat abilities, but also descended into bloodlust, unusual given their species' natural compatibility with his chemistry. This suggested the tree's corruption affected even those biologically designed to process its sap safely, overriding normal limits and triggering berserker states. The dosage likely played a role, with company members consuming far more sap than traditional Argonian rituals would involve, overwhelming even adapted biology with excessive chemical stimulation. Khajiit and other beast races showed similar patterns, their animalistic aspects amplified by the sap into predatory fury that made them devastating combatants, but uncontrollable. Human and Mer Company members experienced the most dramatic and dangerous effects, their complete lack of Hist-compatible biology, causing the sap to function as a powerful hallucinogen rather than controlled enhancement. These members genuinely couldn't tell reality from illusion while under the influence, their perceptions so thoroughly altered that they saw friends as enemies and civilians as monsters. The hallucinations proved consistent across affected individuals, suggesting the sap triggered specific neural patterns rather than random delusions, possibly imprinting Hist memories of ancient predators onto human brains. Some victims reported seeing goblins specifically during their episodes, perhaps because the Hist-tree's own experiences or racial memories included encounters with these creatures. The sap's addictive properties created physical dependency within weeks of regular use, withdrawal symptoms including tremors, violent mood swings, and eventually death if consumption ceased. Company members who tried to quit described experiencing terrible visions and physical pain. The Hist sap having fundamentally altered their neurochemistry in ways that couldn't be reversed without medical intervention that didn't exist. The player character's single dose during the infiltration quest caused temporary hallucination, but no long-term effects, suggesting one-time exposure was survivable for most races, though traumatic. This distinction explained why the company forced members into regular consumption, each dose reinforcing dependency while maintaining combat effectiveness. The ethical implications of using controlled substances to create super soldiers horrified many who learned the truth, comparing the practice to slavery since members lost free will through chemical means. The Fighters Guild's decline, the Blackwood Company's rapid rise, and the Fighters Guild's corresponding decline revealed systemic weaknesses in Cyrodiil's oldest mercenary organization. The Fighters Guild operated under strict charter rules, governing which contracts they could accept, refusing jobs they deemed beneath warrior dignity or ethically questionable, creating market gap competitors could exploit. Their lengthy application process and character requirements prevented criminals and unsavory characters from joining, maintaining standards but limiting membership when demand for mercenary services exceeded supply. The Blackwood Company exploited both limitations, accepting any contracts the Fighters Guild refused and recruiting anyone who could fight regardless of moral character, quickly building membership and reputation. Their enhanced combat abilities from Hist, sap, allowed company members to complete difficult contracts faster and more effectively than guild members, stealing clients who cared about results rather than methods. The guild's decentralized structure, with local halls operating semi-independently under their city's leadership, prevented coordinated response to the company threat, each hall competing separately rather than presenting united front. Count Terentius of Bravil and other clients openly preferred the company's flexibility and effectiveness, caring little about the means used as long as results met expectations. The defection of Fighters Guild members to the company, like Maglia, showed how low morale had fallen. Warriors abandoning an institution that seemed increasingly irrelevant. Modrin Orin's obsession with destroying the company stemmed partly from personal grief over his son's death, but also from recognition that the guild faced existential crisis if they couldn't compete. Guildmaster Vilena Donton's paralysis in the face of these threats, refusing to authorize aggressive action against the company, allowed the situation to deteriorate until her own sons died. The guild's reliance on traditional methods and refusing to innovate left them outmatched by competitors willing to use any means necessary, a cautionary tale about institutional rigidity. Their recovery after the company's destruction remained uncertain, since reputation damage persisted even after the threat ended, clients remembering how the guild had been outperformed. The player's elevation to Guildmaster allowed some restructuring, choosing whether to focus on recruitment, contracts, or balanced approach, but couldn't immediately solve deep institutional problems. Some members questioned whether the Fighters Guild had become obsolete, wondering if organizations with their strict codes could survive in Cyrodiil's increasingly immoral mercenary marketplace. Modrin Orin's tragedy. Modrin Orin's personal journey from respected guild champion to expelled outcast to eventual second-in-command illustrated how crisis could destroy and rebuild careers. His son Vitellus died years earlier during a failed Fighters Guild contract against the bandit Azani Blackheart, a mission that killed 15 of 20 participants, devastating Modrin personally and professionally. The Blackwood Company's claim to have completed that same contract raised Modrin's suspicions, beginning his investigation into their methods and ultimately discovering their deception. When the company later killed his other son Varanus at Forsaken Mine, making it appear trolls were responsible, Modrin's grief transformed into obsessive vendetta that clouded his judgment. He demanded the guild take aggressive action against the company, accusing Guildmaster Vilena Donton of cowardice when she refused to authorize attacks without proof of wrongdoing. This confrontation resulted in Modrin's expulsion from the guild he'd served faithfully for decades, sacrificing his position rather than abandon his quest for justice. His continued investigation as independent operator, recruiting the player character to gather evidence through kidnapping and infiltration, violated both guild charter and imperial law. The torture of Ajum Kharjin, forcing confession through systematic beating, showed how far Modrin had descended into moral compromise, becoming almost as ruthless as his enemies. When the player confirmed the company's dark secret, Modrin's vindication proved hollow, since both his sons remained dead, regardless of who bore responsibility. His relationship with Vilena never fully recovered, even after the company's destruction. Her grief over her own sons' deaths, matching his but creating distance rather than common ground. The final irony saw Modrin effectively running the guild from his second-in-command position, while the player served as figurehead guildmaster, the outcast finally achieving the power he'd sought, but without the title. His decisions about guild focus, recruitment, and contracts shaped its future more than the formal leader's pronouncements, showing how institutional authority sometimes flows separate from official hierarchy. Modrin's story demonstrated how personal tragedy could motivate heroism, but also moral compromise. His willingness to torture, kidnap, and violate law making him simultaneously protagonist and cautionary tale. The Water's Edge Massacre. The Blackwood Company's attack on the village of Water's Edge, where members under His-sap influence slaughtered innocent civilians while perceiving them as goblins, represents one of Oblivion's darkest non-supernatural atrocities. The contract called for eliminating a goblin threat, a routine extermination job that should have been straightforward, but the company's use of corrupted His-sap transformed it into nightmare. Members genuinely believed they were fighting monsters, their hallucinations so complete they couldn't recognize human screams or surrender attempts, seeing only the enemy their compromised minds created. The player character's unwitting participation in this massacre, having drunk the sap as part of Blackwood Company initiation, created powerful psychological horror as they gradually realized what they'd done. Waking up covered in blood with no memory of the violence, then slowly piecing together the truth through survivor testimony and physical evidence, generated revulsion that transcended typical video game violence. The survivors' terror and trauma, seeing friends and family members butchered by mercenaries who laughed and celebrated throughout the slaughter, demonstrated the human cost of the company's methods. Imperial authorities' failure to investigate thoroughly, accepting company claims of goblin attack at face value, showed how institutional corruption or incompetence enabled ongoing atrocities. The massacre destroyed Water's Edge as functioning community. Survivors traumatized beyond, recovery and the village's population decimated. A wound that wouldn't heal within the remaining timeline of Oblivion. The company's continued operation after this incident, with no legal consequences despite overwhelming evidence of their crime, revealed how wealth and political connections could buy immunity even for mass murder. The fact that company members themselves were victims of sorts, their agency stolen through chemical manipulation, complicated moral culpability but didn't erase the horror of their actions. Some philosophers use this incident to debate questions of responsibility under impaired judgment, whether intoxication or hallucination fully excused participation in atrocity. The player's decision to destroy the history and eliminate the company stemmed partly from preventing future Water's Edges, though revenge for the psychological trauma of unwitting participation likely motivated as well. The survivor's later testimony at the player's request provided some justice, exposing the truth publicly even if legal accountability proved impossible. The massacre's memory haunted many who learned of it, serving as a reminder that sometimes the real monsters wore human faces and served contracts signed by respectable clients. Velena Donton's paralysis. Guildmaster. Velena Donton's leadership during the Blackwood Company crisis demonstrated how grief and indecision could destroy institutions from within. She inherited the guild leadership from her predecessors as capable administrator, maintaining operations effectively during normal circumstances, but the escalating company threat exceeded her comfort zone. The death of her son Vitellus years earlier in the Azani Blackheart contract left her risk-averse, reluctant to authorize dangerous operations that might cost more lives, creating paralysis precisely when decisive action was needed. When Modrin Orin demanded the guild take aggressive stance against the company, Velena refused, requiring absolute proof before authorizing what she viewed as potentially illegal assault on a rival organization. Her caution had merit, since attacking the company without evidence of wrongdoing could have triggered Imperial intervention against the guild, potentially destroying it through legal means rather than competition. However, her unwillingness to investigate thoroughly herself, relying entirely on others to provide the evidence she demanded, showed leadership failure that allowed the company to operate freely. The death of her other son Varanus at Forsaken Mine, murdered by company members while she dithered, broke something fundamental in Velena's spirit, transforming grief into complete withdrawal. Her expulsion of Modrin after their confrontation, one of the few decisive actions she took during the crisis, eliminated the guild's most motivated investigator and created internal division. When evidence of the company's crimes finally emerged, Velena's response consisted mainly of authorizing the player's attack while remaining passive herself, delegating rather than leading. After the company's destruction, she immediately retired rather than attempting to rebuild, abandoning the guild that needed her experience and knowledge during crucial recovery period. Some viewed this retirement as cowardice, fleeing responsibility precisely when the organization required strong leadership to consolidate victory and restore reputation. Others sympathized with her trauma, understanding that losing both sons to guild conflicts destroyed any remaining motivation to continue leading warriors into danger. Her appointment of the player character as new guild master represented both recognition of deserved leadership and complete abdication of her own responsibility, creating power vacuum during transitional crisis. The player's lack of traditional guild training or administrative experience made the promotion questionable from meritocratic perspective, though their demonstrated competence in crisis situations justified the choice. Velena's fate after retirement remained unknown, presumably living in Coral with her grief, a cautionary example of how even capable leaders could fail when personal tragedy intersected with professional responsibility. Hieronymus Lex's relocation. Captain Hieronymus Lex's transfer to Anvil following the Grey Fox questline represented both punishment and opportunity, demonstrating the complicated politics of Imperial law enforcement. Lex served as Imperial Watch Captain with genuine dedication to duty, his obsessive pursuit of the Grey Fox stemming from legitimate desire to eliminate Cyrodiil's most notorious criminal. His investigation methods proved thorough and professional, following evidence chains and conducting proper interviews, making him effective if unimaginative law enforcement officer. The Waterfront District residents' hatred of Lex stemmed from his heavy-handed tactics, suspecting everyone of possible Grey Fox connections and conducting frequent searches that harassed innocent poor people. His particular focus on Methredel, an actual thief but not the Grey Fox herself, showed both his investigative competence and his tendency toward tunnel vision, correctly identifying criminal activity but missing the larger picture. The player's theft of his personal diary and delivery to the corrupt Elder Council member who'd been blocking his investigation created ironic situation where exposing corruption ended up undermining good cop. Count Corvus Umbranox, secretly the Grey Fox himself, engineered Lex's transfer to Anvil as reward for effective police work, a genuine promotion that removed the threat to his criminal identity. Lex's appointment as Anvil's new watch captain represented career advancement, taking over guard force for one of Cyrodiil's wealthiest cities with better resources than Imperial City Waterfront. However, the transfer separated him from his investigation just when he'd been making progress, frustrating him personally, even if beneficial professionally. His replacement in the Imperial City proved less effective, allowing Grey Fox operations to proceed with less interference, demonstrating Lex's competence through contrast with his successor. Some Imperial City guards privately mourned Lex's transfer, respecting his dedication even if they disliked his methods. recognizing that effective leadership was being rewarded with exile. The Anvil Guards initially resented their new captain, viewing him as outsider imposed on them rather than promoted from within, creating tension that required time to resolve. Lex's administration in Anvil proved effective but uninspired, maintaining order without innovative approaches, demonstrating that his talents suited enforcement better than leadership. His eventual fate during the Oblivion Crisis remained unrecorded, though as competent guard commander, he presumably led Anvil's defense with the same thoroughness he'd shown investigating the Grey Fox. High Chancellor. Okato's divided loyalties. Okato first holds position as de facto ruler of Cyrodiil during the Oblivion Crisis, created impossible situation where every decision disappointed someone, revealing the fundamental weakness of council-based governance during existential threats. As High Chancellor of the Elder Council and former Imperial Battle Mage, Okato possessed both administrative authority and magical power, theoretically ideal leader for the crisis, yet his every action proved controversial. His refusal to recall legions from other provinces to defend Cyrodiil against Oblivion Gates stemmed from strategic calculation that weakening defenses elsewhere would simply relocate the crisis rather than solving it. Imperial generals confirmed that all legions were fully committed to maintaining order in their assigned provinces, where Oblivion Gates were opening just as frequently as in Cyrodiil. Count Marius Caro of Leowyn criticized Okato for prioritizing other provinces over the Heartland, abandoning Cyrodiil cities to fend for themselves while the imperial capital remained mysteriously gate-free. This criticism overlooked that the Empire's survival required holding all provinces, not just Cyrodiil, and that concentrated forces in one region would doom the rest. Count Regulus Terentius of Bravil accused Okato of using the crisis to crown himself emperor, pointing to how conveniently the Elder Council's emergency powers expanded during wartime. These accusations revealed paranoid thinking, since Okato could have seized imperial throne immediately after Uriel's assassination if power motivated him, rather than maintaining constitutional processes. His genuine reluctance to assume emergency authority, delegating military decisions to the counts, and supporting Martin Septim's claim once discovered, demonstrated integrity that political opponents refused to acknowledge. The political crisis Okato warned about, threatening if he recalled troops from provinces, proved prescient since Black Marsh seceded shortly after the Oblivion Crisis, and other provinces began threatening independence. His acceptance of Martin as emperor showed Okato valued legitimate authority over personal power, immediately supporting the Septim heir despite months of effectively ruling the empire himself. When Martin sacrificed himself to end the crisis, Okato's leadership became permanent by default, appointed potentate by the Elder Council, since no other suitable candidate emerged. His subsequent assassination around 14 years later, during the Stormcrown interregnum, revealed how his moderate approach had satisfied nobody, making him vulnerable to extremists on all sides. Okato's legacy demonstrated that competent, principled leadership during crisis often goes unappreciated, with success taken for granted, and every compromise portrayed as betrayal by those who refuse to acknowledge impossible choices. The Elder Council's fragmentation, the Elder Council's dissolution during and after the Oblivion Crisis, illustrated how centralized imperial authority depended on the emperor as unifying figure, collapsing into competing factions without it. The council's ancient precedent of ruling during imperial vacancies had worked in previous eras when succession was clear and temporary. But the Septim dynasty's complete extinction created unprecedented situation. Most Elder Council members returned to their home provinces shortly after Uriel's assassination, officially to handle local emergencies, but practically abandoning central authority when it mattered most. The Inner Council, smaller body of senior members including Okato, attempted to maintain governmental function, but their authority derived from imperial approval that no longer existed. Provincial governors and counts increasingly ignored council directives, recognizing that without emperor to enforce compliance, the Elder Council held power only over those who chose to obey. The council's failure to locate or create a new emperor, despite months of searching, revealed either incompetence or deliberate stalling, members preferring weak central authority to strong imperial rule. Some council members actively benefited from the power vacuum, expanding their influence in provinces while pretending to search for legitimate heir, making Martin's emergence politically inconvenient for them. The council's quick acceptance of Martin once the player presented him showed they valued legitimacy when forced to acknowledge it, but their lack of support in actually finding him revealed true priorities. After Martin's sacrifice, the council convened to select new emperor through traditional voting, but months of deliberation produced no consensus. Members deadlocked between competing interests. This paralysis led to Okato's appointment as potentate, emergency position that granted imperial authority without imperial title, satisfying nobody but preventing complete governmental collapse. The council's increasing irrelevance during this period allowed provinces to drift toward independence, the empire beginning its long decline into the fragmented state seen in later Elder Scrolls games. Provincial Elder Council members who'd abandoned the imperial city never returned, establishing parallel power centers in their home regions that competed with rather than supported central authority. The corruption and incompetence that had plagued the council under the Septims became even worse without imperial oversight, petty tyrants and bureaucrats enriching themselves while empire crumbled. Okato's assassination in 4E15 eliminated the last figure maintaining imperial cohesion, triggering the Stormcrown interregnum, where competing claimants tore the empire apart through civil war. The chaos lasted until Titus Mede seized the imperial city in 4E22, establishing the Fourth Empire through conquest rather than legitimacy, demonstrating the council's complete failure to provide alternative governance structure. The Imperial Corruption questline. The side quest exposing corrupt Imperial Watch. Captain Ordens Avidius revealed how systemic corruption infected Cyrodiil's law enforcement at every level. Avidius used his position to extort merchants and civilians, demanding payoffs in exchange for protection, or looking the other way on invented infractions. His shakedown of Jensen's good as new merchandise demonstrated typical pattern, targeting successful businesses that could afford bribes rather than actually investigating crimes. The victim's fear of reporting corruption to Avidius's superiors showed how thoroughly the problem had infected the system, witnesses assuming all guards were corrupt and would protect each other. The player's investigation required convincing witnesses Luronk Gro Glurzog and Ruslan to testify, their initial refusal revealing legitimate fear of retaliation from guards who could legally arrest or kill them. Captain Itius Haynes' assignment to investigate his fellow captain showed that some honest officers still served, though even he required substantial evidence before acting against a colleague. The disposition minigame required to convince witnesses to testify represented the social capital needed to overcome institutional fear. People more willing to risk themselves for someone they trusted. Avidius's arrest provided temporary justice, but his escape from prison 10 days later demonstrated how corruption extended to jailers who either helped or ignored his flight. The note found on Ovidius after killing him referenced using the same escape route as the player had used leaving the Imperial prison sewers, suggesting guards knew about and tolerated security vulnerabilities. Some players chose to spare Ovidius after raising his disposition, using charm magic or persuasion to make him friendly enough that he wouldn't attack after escaping, demonstrating how social manipulation could diffuse even justified violence. The quest's modest reward, simple fame points rather than substantial gold, reflected the realistic outcome that fighting corruption rarely pays well financially, even when morally necessary. The lack of systemic reform following Ovidius's exposure showed how individual bad actors could be removed without addressing underlying problems, the watch likely containing numerous other corrupt officers who learned to be more careful. The quest's placement as minor side content rather than major storyline suggested how normalized corruption had become in Cyrodiil, treated as background problem rather than crisis requiring focused attention. Later lore revealed that the Imperial Watch's corruption only worsened after the Oblivion Crisis, with Okato's weak government unable or unwilling to enforce accountability, the rot spreading until Titus Mede's conquest imposed martial order. Cyrodiil's regional geography. The province's division into distinct geographical regions created varied environments that shaped local culture and strategic importance during the Oblivion Crisis. The heartlands surrounding Lake Rumare and the Imperial City represented Cyrodiil's agricultural center, fertile valleys producing food that fed the entire province, making them priority targets for Daedric invasion. The Great Forest to the north and west provided valuable timber resources while creating defensive barriers, dense woodland that slowed Daedric advance, but also concealed Oblivion gates. The Gerald Mountains along the Skyrim border isolated Bruma from the rest of Cyrodiil, harsh terrain creating hardy population, but limiting support options when gates opened nearby. The Gold Coast's warm climate and Abatian Sea access made Anvil and Kvatch wealthy trading ports before the crisis destroyed Kvatch and isolated Anvil. The Blackwood region's swamps near Leowyn created treacherous terrain favoring guerrilla tactics, helping defend against organized Daedric assaults, but providing cover for smuggling and criminal activity. The West Weald between Skingrad and Kvatch featured rolling hills and vineyards, Skingrad's wine industry making it economically important, despite distance from Imperial City. The Nibonay basins, rivers and lakes facilitated trade and travel, but created numerous water approaches that defending forces had to monitor, stretching resources thin. The Colovian Highlands in the northwest represented frontier territory, sparse population and rugged terrain creating self-reliant communities that needed less imperial support. The Valus Mountains along the Morrowind border contain numerous Ayleid ruins and mysterious locations, ancient history creating both archaeological opportunity and dangerous hidden spaces. Each region's different terrain affected how Oblivion gates manifested and had to be closed. Forest gates requiring different tactics than mountain or swamp gates, demonstrating Daedric forces' adaptation to local conditions. The uneven distribution of major cities, with the Imperial City dominating the center while leaving vast rural areas sparsely populated, created defensive challenges when gates could open anywhere. Some regions received no attention in the main quest, despite surely experiencing attacks, like the area around Shadenhall which must have faced gates but never gets mentioned. suggesting the player's actions represented small fraction of total crisis response. The Ayleid Well Network. The 33 Ayleid wells scattered across Cyrodiil represented ancient magical infrastructure that still functioned millennia after their creator's extinction. These wells drew power directly from Aetherius, the plane of magic, channeling it through Ayleid-designed focal points that converted raw magical energy into usable form. Each well provided temporary magicka boost and significant magicka restoration to anyone who activated them, suggesting the Ayleids designed them for public benefit rather than restricted elite use. The well's placement followed patterns that scholars struggled to understand, some near ruins suggesting infrastructure for abandoned cities, others in remote locations implying purposes lost to time. Many wells sat atop or near points where the barrier between Mundus and Aetherius thinned naturally, ancient elves identifying and exploiting these weak points for magical advantage. The wells recharged at midnight each night, their connection to celestial mechanics showing sophisticated understanding of how astronomical phenomena affected magical flows. Some wells remained hidden or difficult to access, requiring exploration off main roads to discover, rewarding curious adventurers with free magical power. The wells' continued function, despite their creator's absence, demonstrated Ayleid magical engineering's quality. Systems designed to operate autonomously for thousands of years without maintenance. Their indestructibility proved equally impressive, surviving wars, weather, and deliberate attempts at destruction without suffering noticeable damage, suggesting protective enchantments beyond modern understanding. Mages Guild researchers studied the wells extensively, but never fully understood their construction, able to describe their effects, but not replicate or modify them. Some wells showed evidence of modification or repair by later cultures, crude additions to Ayleid originals, suggesting attempts to maintain or enhance function. The well's power made them valuable strategic resources during the Oblivion Crisis, locations where defenders could refresh their magical reserves between battles with Daedric forces. A few wells sat near Oblivion Gate spawn points, perhaps indicating Daedric invasion deliberately targeted thin spots the Ayleids had previously identified and exploited. The variation in each well's appearance, from simple stone pedestals to elaborate carved monuments, reflected different Ayleid city-states' architectural preferences, the well network representing combined effort of multiple kingdoms. Some scholars theorize the wells formed larger magical grid connecting across Cyrodiil, each individual well serving as node in province-wide enchantment whose purpose remained mysterious. Unmarked location stories. Cyrodiil's countless unmarked locations, from abandoned campsites to ruined structures, contained environmental storytelling that revealed the province's hidden history. The all things alchemical ruins near Memorial Cave, remnants of Falanu Hlalu's original shop before she moved to Skingrad, showed how commerce could fail in remote locations despite quality goods. The stone stairs, northwest of Cloud Ruler Temple, leading to braziers and locked chest on mountainside, suggested ancient shrine or way station whose purpose had been forgotten. The shipwreck north of Beldeburo, partially buried in sand with scattered cargo, told story of merchant disaster lost to Cyrodiil's historical record. The unmarked graveyard northeast of Skingrad, with stone circles suggesting ritual significance, implied pre-imperial burial traditions that local population no longer practiced or remembered. The ruined tower structure southeast of Lipson Tarn, featuring wooden bridge above crumbling stone, showed defensive position that had failed to prevent its own destruction. The numerous unmarked campsites featuring bedrolls and supplies, but no inhabitants, created eerie suggestion of people who'd fled suddenly, leaving possessions behind in panic or death. Some sites contained recent additions like lit fires suggesting current use, while others showed decay, indicating years or decades of abandonment. Time's passage visible in environmental details. The placement of valuable items in these locations, from skill books to enchanted equipment to gold, raised questions about who'd left them and why they remained unclaimed. Bralsa Underin's bedroll near the Wayshrine of Kinnereth, where the eccentric master destruction trainer lived outdoors, demonstrated some locations served as homes rather than ruins or camps. The piers and docks scattered around water bodies, often containing barrels, crates, and even coffins, suggested smuggling operations or illicit trade that official records didn't document. The camps occupied by bandits in partial ruins showed how criminals repurposed abandoned structures, civilization's failures becoming opportunities for lawlessness. Some unmarked locations appeared to be connected to quests that were cut from the final game. Environmental details suggesting narrative purposes that never materialized. The concentration of unmarked locations in certain regions versus scarcity in others reflected development priorities. Areas near major cities receiving more detailed world building than remote wilderness. Players who systematically explored these sites found substantial rewards in aggregate. The individual locations containing modest loot but collectively providing wealth rivaling quest rewards. The Imperial Reserve mystery. The Imperial Reserve mentioned by NPCs, but never appearing as accessible location, created one of Oblivion's more intriguing geographical mysteries. Characters referenced it as region within the Colovian Highlands, somewhere northwest of Coral. But the game contained no map marker or distinct boundaries for this area. The reserve designation suggested land set aside for specific imperial purpose, perhaps hunting grounds for the Emperor or military training area, but the game never clarified its function. Some players speculated it represented content cut during development, planned location or questline that didn't make the final release, but whose references remained in NPC dialogue. The lore established the reserve existed before the Oblivion Crisis, likely dating to earlier Septim emperors, who'd established it for purposes now lost to current characters. Its mention specifically as being in the Colovian Highlands placed it in territory accessible to players, yet no distinctive features marked it as separate from surrounding wilderness. This ambiguity allowed players to imagine the reserve's nature, with theories ranging from wildlife sanctuary to proving grounds for Legion recruits to secret research facility. The lack of Oblivion gates specifically attributed to the reserve suggested either it wasn't militarily significant or that its gates were handled off-screen by regular Legion forces. The failure of any major quest to involve the reserve felt conspicuous, given how thoroughly the game covered other regions, creating sense that important location had been overlooked. Some modders later created content imagining what the reserve might contain, filling perceived gap with fan interpretations, since developers never provided official explanation. The mention of the reserve without development created useful world building, nonetheless, suggesting Cyrodiil contained locations important to its society that adventurers never personally visited, maintaining sense of world existing beyond players' direct experience. Later, Elder Scrolls games never clarified the reserve's nature, leaving it permanent mystery of Oblivion's geography, ambiguous reference that sparked more discussion than definitive explanation might have. Land-Druk biology. The Land-Druk encountered in Cyrodiil's swamps represented one stage in the bizarre life cycle of these semi-aquatic creatures from the deep oceans. True Dro lived underwater, squid-like beings with complex civilization that had once ruled Tamriel during the previous Kalpa, before Mundus's current form existed. Each year, some underwater Drurch underwent Karvinasim, biological transformation that allowed them to emerge onto land, growing legs and adapting respiratory systems for air breathing. This metamorphosis served reproduction purposes in Dro culture. Land phase individuals traveling inland to mate before returning to the sea, completing a cycle crucial to their species' continuation. The land Drurch's appearance combined crustacean features like armored shell and pincers with disturbingly humanoid arms and posture, creating unnatural hybrid form that unsettled observers. Their innate shock damage attacks suggested biological electricity generation, possibly adaptation for stunning prey in water that remained effective on land. The Drurch wax they produced served as valuable alchemy ingredient regardless of whether harvested from land or sea forms, suggesting the substance remained constant despite physiological changes. Farmers near swampy areas referred to land Drurch as billies, for reasons never explained, the folk name suggesting long history of encountering these creatures during seasonal migrations. The Drurch's intelligence remained unclear, with ancient texts describing them as sophisticated civilization, while current-era specimens seemed merely bestial, raising questions about whether Karvinasim affected mental capacity. Some scholars theorize that modern Drurch represented degenerated remnants of once great species. Their civilization collapsed after the Kalpa change, rendered them vulnerable to younger races. The Histon Argonians of Black Marsh maintained complicated relationship with Dro, the swamps where both species lived creating territorial overlap that generated both conflict and possible symbiosis. The fact that Dro continued their land migrations despite the danger from hunters and predators demonstrated biological imperative that outweighed survival instinct, reproduction compelling them to risk death. Players who encountered land Dro often found them more dangerous than their placement as mid-level enemies suggested, the shock damage and the high health making them formidable opponents in swamp environments. The limited Dro population in-game, appearing only in specific locations rather than widespread across all appropriate terrain, suggested either rarity or that the game showed only small fraction of their total numbers. Their connection to the previous Kalpa and Molag Bal's sphere added mythological significance beyond simple monster encounters. Land Drurch representing living links to reality that existed before Mundus. Minotaur origins and society. Minotaurs encountered throughout Cyrodiil's wilderness and ruins connected to ancient imperial history through their possible descent from Moray House, the winged man-bull demigod who fought alongside Alessia. Moray House, described as the breath of kine in songs, participated in the Alessian slave rebellion against the Aelids, his superhuman strength and battle fury making him legendary warrior. His son, Belhaza, called the Man-Bull, allegedly ruled as second emperor of the First Cyrodiilic Empire, though historical records remained fragmentary and possibly mythologized. If modern Minotaurs descended from Moray House's bloodline, their current, bestial state represented tragic degeneration from semi-divine origins, intelligence and nobility replaced by animal aggression. This interpretation explained why Minotaurs possessed vaguely humanoid posture and features despite bull heads, the human elements reflecting Moray House's hybrid nature. Their appearance in 4 distinct physical variations with different horn shapes and coloring suggested either multiple bloodlines or regional adaptations as populations spread across Cyrodiil. The territorial behavior protecting specific locations like Harkane Grove, where the unicorn lived, implied some minotaurs maintained purpose beyond simple predation, possibly ancient duties passed through generations. Their use of warhammers by approximately 1/3 of specimens demonstrated tool use and possibly rudimentary craftsmanship, unless they merely scavenged weapons from defeated foes. Minotaur lords, larger and more dangerous variants, potentially represented alphas or individuals closer to Mori House's bloodline, genetic throwbacks to more powerful ancestors. The headbutt attack that disintegrated armor showed their horns possessed magical or supernatural properties beyond simple physical hardness, perhaps inherited from divine progenitor. Minotaur horns' value as alchemy ingredients reflected the creature's inherently magical nature, their bodies containing properties useful for potion making. Some scholars argued minotaurs represented separate species unrelated to Mori House, pointing to their obvious differences from the winged demigod and lack of definitive genealogical evidence. The concentration of minotaurs in specific regions like the West Weald and mountains suggested either preferred habitats or territorial boundaries they maintained against other creatures. Their aggressive response to intruders in their territory showed sophisticated awareness of space and possession, implying cognitive abilities beyond mere animals. The mystery of whether minotaurs could speak, think, or remember their possible noble heritage remained unsolved, the creatures never attempting communication, even when not attacking. Ogre clan structures. Ogres inhabiting Cyrodiil's highlands and mountains demonstrated organized society through their clan designations like the Pale Pass Ogres and Redguard Valley Ogres. Each clan maintained distinct territories, the naming suggesting geographical claims these creatures defended against rivals and other threats. The hierarchy within clans showed sophistication unexpected from creatures often dismissed as mindless brutes. Titles like Cave Boss, Chieftain, Groundling, Rock Smasher, and Stone Wrecker, indicating specialized roles. Cave bosses presumably led their clans, making decisions about territory and conflicts, while chieftains in larger clans suggested multiple leadership tiers. Rock Smashers and Stone Wreckers' titles implied construction or demolition specialists. Ogres who shaped their environments by breaking stone, possibly creating cave expansions or defensive barriers. Groundlings might represent younger or lower status ogres, though their exact position in clan structure remained unclear from sparse evidence. The clan's territorial nature explained why specific locations always contained ogres rather than random wandering. These areas representing established settlements passed through generations. Their incredible strength and surprising speed made ogres formidable combatants, the combination of power and agility allowing them to overwhelm opponents who underestimated them. The weakness to poison affecting all ogres suggested species-wide vulnerability, possibly related to their biology or metabolism, that made toxins unusually effective. The lack of tool use despite their evident organization indicated either preference for natural weapons or inability to craft implements fine enough for their massive hands. Ogre society's apparent lack of art, culture, or visible civilization beyond basics, territorial claims suggested intelligence focused differently than humanoid races, possibly valuing strength and land over abstraction. Some clans, like the Pale Pass Ogres, lived in regions near historic sites like the Akaviri invasion routes, raising questions about whether they'd witnessed ancient events and maintained oral histories. The Redguard Valley designation implied possible connection to human civilization. either claiming land humans named, or humans naming the valley after the clan's presence there. Players who systematically cleared ogre territories found they'd respawn after time passed, suggesting either population reproduction or immigration from elsewhere. The clans maintaining numbers despite losses. The game never showed female ogres or young, raising biological questions about reproduction and development that lore didn't address. Whether ogres represented devolved humans, evolved beasts, or completely separate species remained uncertain, their origins lost to prehistory, along with so much of Tamriel's deep past. Troll regeneration mechanics. Trolls' most distinctive and dangerous feature, their ability to regenerate health rapidly, made them threats even to experienced adventurers unprepared for prolonged combat. The regeneration appeared supernatural rather than simply biological, wounds closing within seconds at rate that defied natural healing, suggesting magical component to their physiology. This regeneration functioned constantly, meaning trolls recovered from damage even while continuing to fight, creating a situation where insufficient damage output resulted in stalemate or eventual player defeat. Fire damage disrupted the regeneration or dealt damage faster than they could heal, establishing flame as the standard counter tactic. Every experienced adventurer knowing to carry fire spells or enchanted weapons when hunting trolls. The vulnerability to fire suggested their regeneration relied on moisture or specific biological processes that heat disrupted, though the exact mechanism remained mysterious. Swamp trolls and other variants showed the same regenerative abilities despite environmental differences, indicating this feature defined the species rather than representing regional adaptation. The three eyes possessed by all trolls served unknown purpose, possibly providing enhanced vision or depth perception that aided hunting. Their distinctive howl in combat suggesting communication or intimidation tactics. Their ape-like appearance and quadrupedal movement pattern combined unusual agility with raw strength. Trolls capable of rapid charges that closed distance before opponents could react. The complete lack of tool use or clothing despite their size and apparent intelligence suggested either genuine mindlessness or alien thought processes that didn't value technology. Some philosophers used trolls as examples in debates about what constituted sentience, arguing that their hunting tactics and environmental adaptation implied intelligence even without visible civilization. The painted trolls encountered in the painted world during a brush with death quest raised questions about whether trolls could exist in magical paintings, suggesting they represented conceptual creatures as much as biological ones. Kalpa clan trolls in Vatican's depths showed trolls could survive in underground environments cut off from surface ecology for centuries, demonstrating remarkable adaptability. The regeneration's limits became apparent only when damage exceeded healing rate, overwhelming the troll's supernatural recovery through concentrated assault. Groups of trolls rarely work together effectively, their individualistic nature preventing coordinated tactics that would have made them far more dangerous. The absence of troll civilization or constructed shelters suggested nomadic lifestyle or simple territorial claims without permanent structures, preferring natural caves and wilderness to modified environments. Whether trolls reproduced sexually and possessed families or regenerated from pieces like some magical creatures remained unknown. No young trolls or obvious females appearing in-game. Their population's sustainability despite constant hunting by adventurers and guards implied either high birth rates or hidden populations beyond game's represented scope. Spriggan nature spirits. Spriggan's appearance resembling humanoid trees or tree-like women connected them to nature magic and forest preservation. Though their exact origins and purpose remained mysterious, they functioned as nature guardians, protecting specific forest locations from perceived threats, attacking intruders who damaged trees or harvested resources too aggressively. Their ability to summon black bears once daily suggested command over natural animals or friendship with forest creatures who answered their calls for aid. The health regeneration they could activate 3 times daily, completely, restoring wounds, demonstrated magical vitality exceeding even trolls' constant healing, showing they drew power from sources beyond normal biology. Their giggling laughter when idle created unsettling contrast with their violence in combat. Alien mentality that found humor in situations other creatures wouldn't recognize as amusing. The female-coded appearance suggested connection to fertility or growth aspects of nature magic. Spriggans, representing the generative force of forests. Some scholars theorize they were created by the earth bones or emerged spontaneously from ancient forests. Nature itself manifesting defenders when civilization threatened wild spaces. Others argued Spriggans descended from ancient Aldmer who transformed themselves into nature spirits, their current form representing magical evolution across eons. Their vulnerability to fire made sense given wooden composition. Flames representing ultimate destruction for creatures whose bodies grew from and resembled trees. The fact that Spriggans dropped taproot, a valuable alchemy ingredient, when killed, suggested they possessed actual plant biology rather than merely resembling plants, their bodies functioning through photosynthesis and mineral absorption like trees. The spawning of Spriggans along forest roads suggested that they monitored travel routes, protecting wilderness from expansion of civilization's pathways. Their appearance near swamps and waterlogged forests showed adaptability beyond typical trees' environmental preferences, Spriggans thriving in diverse ecosystems. Some Spriggans showed no immediate aggression, attacking only when approached too closely or threatened directly, suggesting territorial behavior rather than automatic hostility. The species distribution across Tamriel, appearing in Cyrodiil, Skyrim, and other provinces, indicated widespread presence, their populations maintained despite constant conflict with expanding civilization. The absence of young Spriggans or visible reproduction suggested either they emerged fully formed from magical processes or had life cycles players never witnessed. Whether Spriggans possessed individual identities and memories or represented fungible manifestations of forest spirit remained debatable, their behavior showing both personality quirks and generic responses. The relationship between Spriggans and other nature-affiliated creatures like wisps remained unclear. No observable alliance or conflict suggesting they served different aspects of natural magic without significant interaction. Imp elemental affiliations. Imps' small winged forms and elemental attack magic connected them to Daedric origins, while maintaining distinction from other Daedra encountered during the Oblivion Crisis. They employed fire, frost, or shock damage spells, depending on individual preference or perhaps innate affinity, each imp specializing in a single element rather than commanding multiple. This specialization suggested either natural ability, like Atronachs, or learned focus, like mage schools, imps channeling elemental forces through unknown means. Their flight ability made them frustrating opponents, since melee combatants struggled to reach them during aerial combat, forcing reliance on ranged attacks or magic. The relative weakness of individual imps, falling quickly to concentrated damage despite their mobility, indicated either fragile biology or low power level in Daedric hierarchy. Vault Guardians added with the Wizard's Tower. Official content showed imps could be bound to specific locations as magical sentries, suggesting they made effective servants for more powerful entities. The laughter and taunting sounds imps made during combat created impression of malicious intelligence, creatures who enjoyed causing pain and witnessing others suffering. Their appearance across various environments, from swamps to ruins to Oblivion plains themselves, demonstrated adaptability, imps thriving in diverse conditions without environmental specialization. The question of whether Cyrodiil's imps migrated from Oblivion or represented permanent population indigenous to Mundus never received clear answer, their Daedric nature suggesting otherworldly origin, but consistent presence implying long-term residence. Some scholars classified imps as lesser Daedra, ranking them below Dremora and major Atronachs, but above purely animalistic Daedric creatures like scamps. The elemental damage they dealt scaled with their level, higher level imps commanding more powerful spells, suggesting magical ability increased with age or experience. Groups of imps showed no obvious coordination in combat, each attacking independently rather than employing tactics or supporting companions, indicating individualistic nature. The presence of imps in pre-crisis Cyrodiil meant they predated the invasion, raising questions about how they arrived and maintained populations without widespread notice or concern. Their correlation with monster dungeons in leveled spawn lists meant players encountered imps as alternatives to minotaurs or ogres, very different creatures grouped together presumably by danger level rather than biology. The lack of any non-hostile imps or imp civilization suggested they existed purely as threats, servants, or wild creatures without developing culture, despite evident intelligence. Whether imps could reproduce or required summoning from Oblivion to maintain numbers remained unclear. No young or reproductive behavior visible in-game. Dwemer artifacts in Cyrodiil. The almost complete absence of Dwemer ruins in Cyrodiil reflected historical reality that the Deep Folk never established significant presence in the province. Their civilization focused on Morrowind, Skyrim, and Hammerfell. The single Dwemer cog displayed in an unreachable case in the Arcane University represented either archaeological find or imported artifact, physical evidence of this vanished culture existing even in regions they never colonized. This artifact's presence in Mages Guild headquarters suggested scholarly interest in Dwemer technology, researchers studying the mysterious engineering, even though local access to ruins was non-existent. The cog's unreachable placement behind locked display prevented players from examining it closely, creating frustrating situation where tantalizing evidence existed but remained inaccessible. Some players interpreted this as deliberate tease by developers, acknowledging Dwemer's significance while maintaining focus on Ayleid ruins more appropriate to Cyrodiil's setting. The lack of functioning Dwemer technology in Cyrodiil prevented the automatons, steam machinery, and tonal architecture that made their ruins in other provinces so memorable and dangerous. This absence meant Cyrodiil's ancient ruins focused on Ayleid mysticism rather than Dwemer industry. Magic versus technology as contrasting approaches to power and knowledge. Umbacano's collection of Ayleid artifacts showed how Cyrodiil's archaeological community focused on locally relevant civilizations. Dwemer studies requiring travel to regions where ruins remained intact. The scholarly texts available in Cyrodiil discussing Dwemer history came from studies conducted elsewhere, second-hand knowledge rather than direct research on local sites. The deep folk's appearance in Ayleid records showed the two civilizations interacted. The siege of Mzulft by Ayleid forces demonstrating contact and conflict between elven races. The timeline of that siege placed it before the Dwemer's mysterious disappearance, suggesting the Ayleids knew living Dwemer and possibly understood more about their fate than modern scholars. The failure of that Ayleid siege to breach Mzulft demonstrated Dwemer defensive capabilities exceeded even advanced magical civilizations' assault, their engineering creating fortifications that outlasted both cultures. The Wrathstone the Ayleids sought split between Dwemer ruins, connected both cultures to artifacts of enormous power, the competition for such items driving prehistorical conflicts. The fact that Dwemer ruins in distant provinces still contained active machinery thousands of years after their civilization's extinction showcased engineering beyond anything Cyrodiil's Ayleids achieved. The difference between mystic and mechanistic approaches to permanence. Modern Cyrodiilic mages acknowledge Dwemer sophistication while focusing on more accessible Ayleid sites, practical considerations of proximity outweighing theoretical interest in lost technology. The mystery of Dwemer disappearance remained as unsolved in Cyrodiil as elsewhere. Various theories from ascension to dimensional exile to catastrophic accident and all equally lacking evidence. Ayleid Wells astronomical connections. The Ayleid Wells midnight recharge tied them to celestial mechanics, specifically the daily rotation of Mundus, that brought different influences of Aetherius into alignment with terrestrial focal points. The Wells drew power not from Magnus's sun, but from the stars, the holes in oblivion through which magicka leaked from Aetherius into the mortal plane. This connection explained their function as condensers, gathering dispersed ethereal energy and concentrating it into usable form for mortal mages. The midnight timing suggested the wells required darkness to function optimally, daylight's overwhelming magical radiation from Magnus possibly interfering with their subtle collection of starlight power. Alternatively, midnight represented true north for celestial alignment, the moment when Mundus's rotation positioned the wells correctly relative to specific stars or constellations. Some scholars noted that certain wells aligned with major constellations visible from Cyrodiil, like the Mage, the Warrior, or the Thief, suggesting they might draw from specific stellar influences. This would explain variation in the exact magnitude of magical restoration different wells provided, each tuned to different celestial sources with varying power outputs. The wells' placement at locations where the barrier between Mundus and Aetherius thinned, naturally, meant the Ayleids had sophisticated understanding of cosmological topology, mapping weak points across their territory. Their ability to identify and exploit these locations demonstrated knowledge combining astronomy, mathematics, and magical theory at levels modern scholars struggle to replicate. The well's construction from special Ayleid stone or crystal, materials that resonated with ethereal energies, showed they understood material science as it applied to magical conduction. The enchantments making the wells indestructible likely drew from the same ethereal power they harvested, self-reinforcing systems that fed their own preservation from the energy they collected. Some wells showed evidence of additional astronomical alignments during equinoxes or solstices, their power potentially varying seasonally, though game mechanics didn't represent these fluctuations. The complete network of 33 wells might have formed larger magical structure, the number possibly holding numerological significance in Ayleid cosmology, and each well serving as node in province-wide enchantment. Speculative theories suggested the wells served defensive purpose, maintaining barrier that kept enemies or unwanted influences from Cyrodiil, their network creating magical border. The wells' continued function after Ayleid extinction meant their magic operated autonomously, perhaps drawing directly from Aetherius without requiring conscious direction or maintenance. This distinguished them from most magical artifacts that required soul gems or regular recharging. The wells representing perfect perpetual motion through celestial alignment. The 10 ancestor statues. The Ayleid statues collected during the Collector Quest represented the 10 ancestors, mythological or historical figures, who once stood in the Temple of the Ancestors, later known as White Gold Tower. Each statue depicted different individual with distinct appearance and posture, suggesting they commemorated specific people, rather than generic figures, though their identities had been lost to time. Umbacano's obsession with collecting these statues stemmed from legitimate archaeological interest, combined with delusions of recovering Ayleid cultural heritage. His research identifying where the statues had been taken after the temple's fall. The statues' dispersal to various Ayleid ruins following the Alessian slave rebellion showed how the collapsing empire attempted to preserve sacred artifacts, distributing them to different locations rather than risking their destruction in the capital. This distribution strategy proved partially successful, since the statues survived thousands of years, despite the ruins containing them falling to bandits, undead, and necromancers. The fact that each statue occupied dangerous ruins requiring combat to reach suggested Ayleids placed them in defended locations, perhaps hoping to reclaim them later, or simply hiding them where humans wouldn't easily find them. Umbacano's payment of 500 gold per statue, double their base merchant value, reflected both their archaeological significance and his personal wealth, making statue hunting profitable for adventurers. The bonus, 5,000 gold for completing the set, showed Umbacano valued the complete collection exponentially more than individual pieces, the wholeness representing something beyond mere sum of parts. His eventual attempt to use the crown of Nenalata to command Umaril's champions, based on research connecting the king's crown to magical control systems, demonstrated how artifacts could interlock individual pieces of larger magical infrastructure. The statue's presence across multiple quests, from the Collector to Nothing You Can Possess, to Secrets of the Ayleids, created narrative thread through Cyrodiil's Ayleid heritage, player actions assembling pieces of ancient history. The moral ambiguity of helping Umbacano, who proved delusional and possibly dangerous, raised questions about whether enabling obsessive collectors served scholarship or encouraged madness. The statues themselves possessed no magical powers when carried or owned, their significance being historical rather than practical, cultural artifacts rather than functional tools. Their survival in intact condition despite millennia showed Ayleid stone crafting skills, materials and techniques, creating art that weathered time when lesser works crumbled. The player's ability to keep or sell the statues after Umbacano's death created choice about whether artifacts should go to museums or individual ownership, commerce versus preservation. The statue's eventual fate in players' hands, or Umbacano's collection, remained uncertain after Oblivion's timeline. No later, games confirming whether the collection was preserved, destroyed, or scattered again. The 10 ancestors' identities might have represented Ayleid kings, divine figures, cultural heroes, or powerful mages, their specific significance lost when the Alessian Order destroyed Ayleid cultural records. The possibility that Umbacano's research was partially correct, meant some knowledge about these figures might have survived in scattered texts, though clearly incomplete enough that their names and deeds remained mysterious. Vala and Welkin stones, the magical stones found in Ayleid ruins, Vala stones and Welkin stones, represented Ayleid technology for storing and utilizing magical energy harvested from Aetherius. Welkin stones, more common and containing moderate magical power, provided immediate magicka restoration when activated, functioning as single-use magical batteries. Their placement throughout ruins in easily accessible locations suggested Ayleids used them as emergency reserves, power sources available to anyone in need during their civilization's height. The stone's luminescence, glowing with inner light visible even after thousands of years, demonstrated the permanent nature of Ayleid enchantments. Magic that didn't decay like modern soul gem-based systems. Vala stones, rarer and more powerful, could recharge enchanted items completely, making them extremely valuable for adventurers using enchanted equipment. The placement of Vala stones in harder-to-reach locations, often requiring solving puzzles or defeating guardians, showed Ayleids considered them more precious than Welkin stones, restricting access even among their own people. Both stone types drew their power from starlight, functioning as condensed captures of ethereal energy similar to the wells but portable and disposable. The magical storage demonstrated Ayleid's understanding of how to crystallize and contain pure magicka, techniques modern mages couldn't replicate except through soul gems, which required killing creatures. The ethical superiority of stones over soul gems became apparent since they harmed no one in creation, drawing from infinite stellar power rather than finite mortal souls. Some scholars theorize the stones slowly regenerated if left undisturbed in locations with strong ethereal connections, though game mechanics represented them as one-time consumables. The variation in Welkin stone power, some providing more restoration than others, might have reflected different grades of craftsmanship or different stellar sources. Vala stone's placement often corresponded with locations of particular magical significance, suggesting Ayleids positioned them at important sites within their cities, perhaps marking temple centers or council chambers. The complete absence of these stones outside Ayleid ruins indicated they'd never been mass-produced or widely distributed to Ayleid population in countryside, remaining special items even during their civilization's existence. Their survival in ruins long after useful lifespan suggested either the enchantments were truly permanent, or the stones regenerated power so slowly that thousands of years hadn't depleted them completely. Modern Cyrodiil's lack of ability to manufacture new Vala or Welkin stones showed how much magical knowledge had been lost, techniques that were routine to Ayleids now seeming impossible to Imperial mages. The prisoner mystery. The player character's identity as the prisoner from Emperor Uriel. Septim's prophetic dreams created fundamental ambiguity about their nature and origins. Uriel's certainty upon seeing the prisoner that they were the figure from his visions suggested either divine insight, direct communication from Akatosh, or the Emperor's own prophetic abilities developed through years of communion with the dragon god. The prisoner's actual crime, the reason for their incarceration in Imperial prison, was never revealed, leaving open possibilities ranging from innocent wrongful imprisonment to serious criminal activity. Their cell's location near the secret entrance to the Imperial sewers suggested either unfortunate coincidence or divine providence, the exact right place at the exact right moment for history to unfold. The question of whether the prisoner was special before meeting Uriel, or became special through that meeting remained unresolved, prophecy potentially creating heroes rather than merely identifying them. The lack of defined backstory allowed player imagination to fill the void, creating whatever history felt appropriate for their character concept, but also raised philosophical questions about predetermined destiny versus free will. If Uriel's dreams truly identified the specific individual necessary to save Cyrodiil, did that prisoner have choice in accepting this role, or were they cosmically bound to fulfill it? The alternative interpretation suggested Uriel's dreams showed archetypes rather than individuals. Anyone matching broad characteristics could serve, and the prisoner simply happened to be available when needed. The complete lack of consequences for the unnamed crime that led to imprisonment showed either divine intervention erasing legal problems or the Empire's pragmatic recognition that saving the world earned clemency. The prisoner's ability to master multiple skills, join every guild, and excel in any approach they chose suggested either extraordinary natural talent or supernatural blessing that made success inevitable. The fact that no previous prisoner in that cell had triggered similar prophecies indicated either rare cosmic alignment of circumstances or suggestion that this prisoner was fundamentally different from all others. The achievement of Champion of Cyrodiil, closing all Oblivion gates and defeating Mehrunes Dagon's invasion, proved the prophecy's accuracy but didn't explain its mechanism. How Uriel knew or why this prisoner specifically. The prisoner's potential to become Archmage, Listener, Guildmaster, Divine Champion, and Sheogorath simultaneously represented either unrealistic power fantasy or genuine cosmic importance, singular individual capable of achievements beyond normal mortals. The contrast between the prisoner's undefined past and legendary future created narrative arc from nothing to everything, imprisonment to divinity, ultimate rags to riches story. Whether the prisoner remembered anything before their imprisonment remained unknown. Amnesia potentially explaining both their lack of backstory and their adaptability to any role. Obscure Daedric quests. Several Daedric shrine quests received less attention than popular ones like Azura's Star or Wabajag, but contain their own intriguing lore and moral complications. Boethia's Tournament of 10 Bloods required player to sacrifice companion to participate, testing ruthlessness by demanding they betray and murder someone who trusted them. This trial perfectly embodied Boethia's fear of betrayal and conspiracy, the Daedric prince revealing character through forcing impossible moral choice. The reward, Goldbrand or Goldbrand's weaker alternative, provided powerful weapon to someone willing to commit murder, showing how Daedric gifts came with blood price. Namira's quest involved helping cannibals obtain fresh corpses to feast upon, requiring player to locate and convince a starving group of civilized cannibals to embrace their nature. Deeply disturbing quest that many players found more unsettling than standard violence. The reward, Ring of Namira, buffed personality while simultaneously reflecting and draining health. Appropriately dark blessing that helped and harmed simultaneously. Malakat's quest required freeing ogres being held by hunters. Moral simplicity unusual for Daedric quests, since liberation rather than corruption was the goal. Though Malakat's association with outcasts and vengeance explained this variance. Mephala quest involved provoking violence between two rival families in Border Watch. Social manipulation that led to murder. Classic divine mischief that ended with destroyed community. The Ebony Blade reward drained health with each strike, growing stronger through accumulated kills. weapon that encouraged continued bloodshed to increase its power. Verminet's nightmare quest sent player into another person's dream world to recover staff. Psychological horror, showing how the Daedric Prince of Nightmares could torment victims through their own subconscious. The Skull of Corruption created evil clones of NPCs, allowing player to murder duplicates without guard response. Morally grey use of summoning magic. These quests demonstrated that even lesser-known Daedric princes maintained consistent themes, each trial reflecting their particular sphere, while testing players' willingness to embrace immorality for reward. Easter egg treasures. Oblivion contained numerous hidden treasures and Easter eggs rewarding exploratory players with unique items and experiences beyond standard questing. The Fin Gleam helmet, located on a skeleton on an island west of Anvil, provided water breathing, night vision, and detect life simultaneously. Extremely useful utility helm, requiring underwater exploration to find. The complete lack of quest or marker pointing toward this helmet meant only thorough explorers or lucky swimmers discovered it, rewarding dedication to investigation. The ghost mudcrab in Paradise, visible only if player swam to distant island during Manka Cameron quest, served no purpose except amusing players who made the journey, absurdist humor in midst of serious content. The unmarked ship captain's corpse with valuable loot, found in unexpected location, rewarded players who investigated every suspicious site rather than rushing between objectives. The test cells, accessible only through console commands, contained every item in-game. Debug areas developers used but left in the files. Technical Easter egg rather than lore-based one. The brush with Death Quest's hidden paintings within paintings showed artistic developers having fun with recursive imagery. Meta-humor about creating painted worlds. The Shivering Isles portal appearing on island near Braville rewarded players who explored coastlines. Major expansions entrance placed in low traffic area requiring initiative to discover. The Unicorn at Harcane Grove, protected by minotaurs and more difficult to ride than normal horses, served as legendary creature hunt, rewarding players who pursued rumors and investigated forest locations. The paintbrushes that floated in midair when dropped. Physics glitch that became beloved feature. Accidentally created stepping stones for players to climb anywhere by dropping brushes and stepping on them. The Nirnroot plants scattered throughout the world with their distinctive glow and chime, leading to optional collection quest, rewarded observant players who noticed unusual vegetation. These hidden elements, from useful to silly to broken but beloved, gave Cyrodiil depth beyond main narrative, encouraging thorough exploration and attention to environmental details.